Sometimes I'm gaining, then again I'm losing. Sometimes I'm rising, yes sir. Then again I'm falling. Sometimes I'm gaining, then again I'm losing. Sometimes I'm rising, yes sir. Then again I'm falling. Let Jesus work it out. Please, your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Please, your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Please, your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Oh, work it out. You work it out for Mother Lisa. Sometimes I'm gaining, then again I'm losing. Sometimes I'm rising, yes sir. Then again I'm falling. Sometimes I'm gaining, then again I'm losing. Sometimes I'm rising, yes sir. Then again I'm falling.
All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is David Patrick Harry with Church of the Eternal Logos. And today we have a bit of an important meeting. And today's stream is actually going to be about some of the latest developments in AI technology. And so there's been a confluence of a lot of different things going on in culture and society, generally speaking. And I think it's all connected. Obviously, what's been popping off over the weekend are the LA riots about ICE raids and deporting illegal immigrants into the country. And we've seen in the last week, Donald Trump endorsed the idea of Palantir data collection. And we're going to be looking a little bit. I got a little section of Whitney Webb trying to give a little bit of a background on the relationship between Peter Thiel, JD Vance, and Palantir. What is it that Palantir actually does? You go to their website. It sounds like they just have software that allows you to use AI for everything and optimization, but it's a little bit darker actually behind the scenes. And Palantir's primary clientele are actually the intelligence agencies of the United States and essentially the Defense Department. And they've built a company that is now, I think it just surpassed Ford Motor Company in overall value. And we're seeing this generally speaking with all these tech companies, right? So Tesla was going up. Of course, we've had the recent feud between Elon Musk and Donald Trump. And, I really don't know what's going on there. I've heard a lot of speculation, some interesting stuff. Certainly Trump saying that has to do with his EV mandate being cut from the Big Beautiful Bill, which is a ginormous bill that's going to add massive amounts of money to the national debt. But again, whatever you feel about the Big Beautiful Bill, we'll leave that aside. But it seems like something a little bit deeper is going on. Clearly, Elon Musk is not obsessed with an EV mandate for Tesla vehicles. And what Elon Musk's primary focus is something much grander than selling more electric cars. That is a step in a process for his technocratic future, which he's been very explicit about in discussing. I mean, this guy is explicitly a transhumanist. That's what Neuralink's all about. And I was telling you guys earlier that, well, in previous streams, that Tesla has taken the lead as of recent. This is according to what I'm reading regarding AI application to robotics. And so some of you guys may be familiar with people like Hans Moravik back in the day talking about mind children, the mind fire, and how AI was going to build these humanoid robots and essentially are going to undercut manual labor and many jobs and careers that people currently hold. Well, this stuff is becoming a reality now. And so when I say emergency, meaning do I think that, oh my gosh, we're in the apocalypse? No, I don't. But what I want to show you guys is a series of connecting of dots to see that the technocratic world order that we've been warning about and this technocracy of centralized global control is certainly on its way. And one of the things that I've been speculating about is the Trump administration. We're already seeing, what was it, the first week in the Trump administration, they signed Project Stargate. Well, what was Project Stargate? Well, if you go back to the 80s, it had to do with remote viewing and various CIA projects using these sort of supernatural abilities and astral projecting so that they could get information on places, military locations, lost people, all types of things through remote viewing, right? Well, now, interestingly enough, they've used Project Stargate to refer to essentially the contemporary, I've referred to it before as the contemporary Manhattan Project, and that there is a race right now amongst the world leaders in regards to AGI, artificial general intelligence. And again, from what I'm reading and trying to keep up on this topic, it sounds like China is perceived to be in the lead in regards to general AI advancement. And Tesla is certainly it sounds like they're the leader in regards to its application to robotics. And Palantir is the world leader in regard to the application of AI to killing, to military, to defense operations. And so obviously, with the Trump administration, there's been a lot of talk about the Zionist lobby, AIPAC, and the intimate political relationship between Israel and America. And there's been words, or at least speculation, that there's a rift between Trump and Netanyahu. Who knows to what degree that is? But what is a fact is that since October 7th, Israel has been partnered with Palantir. Palantir is very open about their immense support for the Israeli war, or what I would refer to as a genocide against Palestinians. And Palantir has been bragging about how they are behind choosing the locations for various bombings and military attacks that Israel's performed. So very interesting. We've seen a massive amount of civilian casualties regarding the Israeli war on Palestine. Really, again, this has been going on for decades and decades. I mean, essentially, Israel's been in a conflict of perpetual expansion since 1948. However, what's different is the ways in which they're utilizing and waging war and the amount of civilians that are deliberately being targeted, which, again, Palantir is very much in favor of. And so Palantir, if you guys don't know, is a reference to the Lord of the Rings, and it has to do with this object, this globe that allows you to see the future, allows you to know things beyond your present capabilities. And that's essentially what Palantir's selling point is that they will be able to prevent crime before it happens because they will know everything about you. Every digital footprint you have will be documented and traced by Palantir. And they're couching this as something very beneficial. And one of the things that I warned about when Trump got elected, and right at the beginning of the administration, and something that I didn't think Trump would be the one to really jump on the technocratic bandwagon. But obviously, Project Stargate was a huge eye opener. That's $500 billion investment for the U.S. government to essentially aid private corporations so that we can win the AI race, so we can be the first ones to the AGI, to what they believe is sentient AI. And whoever gets the first sentient AI will essentially be able to destroy all the other AIs because your AI will be more powerful. So all that's going on. And with the LA riots, one of the things I bring that up is you may see like, what does all these Mexicans, rioting in the streets of LA have to do with what you're talking about, Patrick, with Palantir and technocratic control? And my point is we got to keep our eyes open. What I've been warning about since Trump took office is about JD Vance and his relationship to Peter Thiel. Now, JD Vance says a lot of things, again, I generally agree with. He seems to be one of the more level-headed people in the Trump administration regarding war with Iran. He doesn't seem to be totally pro-Zionist, do anything Israel says. However, he has gone, kissed the wall. I believe he's taken AIPAC money. So, interesting things there. But I was warning that JD Vance, given his relationship and his ties back to Peter Thiel, that he would most likely, if he is considered to be the one to follow Trump in regards to the Republican Party, that I could easily see him bringing the sort of technocratic control in through the lens of conservative politics, that he would use rhetoric regarding immigration, for example, that a technocratic world, AI, Palantir, for example, would be able to track all people within the country constantly at all times. And therefore, we wouldn't have to worry about illegal immigration because we'll know everybody that's in the country. And that certainly sounds fine, but this is what I've been worrying about, is that through the rhetoric of conservative or nationalist or populist causes, they will try to refer back to some of this technology as the means in which you'll be instituted. And so that's exactly what we just saw this past weekend when JD Vance went on the Theo Von podcast. And it was lighthearted. It was funny. There was parts that, again, really humanized JD Vance. Seems like a pretty decent guy. But one of the things that caught my eye that I've been warning about is his support for these digital technologies. And so Theo Von lays out essentially what I'm laying out in not so many words, fear about Palantir and its sort of total control over personal data. And JD Vance's response was, yeah, I get all that, but look at what it can do. And what did he move to? Illegal immigration. Illegal immigration. Now, this is the same week in which Donald Trump, and let me show you right here, that Donald Trump has supported a contract with Palantir. So Donald Trump's reported database move sparks alarm. Dystopian. What's it talking about? Palantir has partnered with the U.S. government in the past, but the reported expansion of its work with the Trump administration has raised concerns that this could be the precursor of surveillance of Americans on a mass scale, and accusations online that the plan mimics the actions of authoritarian states and China's social credit score. Now, again, we've been saying, we've been talking about this topic for at least 4 to 5 years, and 3 years consistently talking about how social credit scores, AI technology is going to be used. We already have the Patriot Act. So anybody that's old enough like me that was alive and conscious during 9/11, we saw that the world totally changed. For those of you that are younger, going on an airplane actually used to be an enjoyable event before you get sexually harassed by TSA agents to get on to board your flight. So the Patriot Act was used by the Bush administration to stop domestic terrorism. And what are we hearing right now? We're hearing that, we need to allow Palantir to have all of your information. We're talking about insurance. We're talking about, your health records, everything that you've done on the internet, every inquiry and prompt you've ever put into AI. This is something that's also recently been coming out, is that OpenAI and a lot of these AI services, is that everything you put in is being tracked and monitored so that they can have a better digital footprint on who you are. So my point in bringing all this stuff up is that it's complicated. Am I telling you that you can never use an AI ever again because it's tied with the B system? No, I'm not saying that. It's complicated. AI is a tool. Again, I don't believe AI can be sentient because I believe sentience actually comes from the soul being made in the image of God. Can AI potentially demonstrate a level of pattern recognition that others would perceive as a form of sentience? Possibly, potentially. And it seems like that's where it's going. So I bring all this up because we're in a point right now where with these LA riots, the Trump administration, the radical change that's going on, the war with Israel and Gaza, the potential war with Iran, what we're seeing, again, combat lay itself out between Ukraine and Russia. Do you think Palantir hasn't been working and utilizing its tools on the battlefields of Ukraine and Russia? Absolutely it has. And this is part of why the neocon and the establishment, generally speaking, even the Trump administration, is still sending money to Ukraine. Still. Now, they're not sending the billions and billions of dollars that the Biden administration was, but Trump has not shut up the U.S. valve of taxpayer money to Ukraine to perpetuate this conflict. And in fact, what we just see last week with the Ukraine attack on Russian military assets, planes specifically that carry nuclear weapons, we saw a plan arise, develop, and be executed that took over a year in preparation. Do you think the Trump administration, do you think the U.S. government didn't know about this attack on Russia? Of course they did. Of course they did. So my point is we have to have a little bit of discernment in regards to what's going on right now in the world and our country, generally speaking, because J.D. Vance, the Trump administration, has things that I certainly support. I'm all in favor of. But are they also in bed with the same people that are interested in a technocratic one world centralized control system? Absolutely. They absolutely are. And if we just look through some of the articles that I have present, it's going to show you that all of this is of recent. All of this is just within the last few weeks or at most just the last few months. And so we've been seeing stocks like NVIDIA, absolutely, it climbed. People are telling you got to invest in that. You got to invest in Tesla. You got to invest in Microsoft and OpenAI and all this different. Well, what's going on? What's going on? Well, what's going on is that there's rapid advancement regarding these technologies and the expectation that we're going to have autonomous semi-trucks around the U.S. This is expected to start this year. Now, this has been speculated for really the last decade, right? They've been telling everybody that drives a semi-truck, hey, you're in a worthless career. We're going to have robots and AI eventually do that. And self-driving systems haven't been up to par to actually do this. But the amount of investment in things like autonomous transport solutions, for example, this is by Volvo, it's expected to ramp up. It's expected that countries like the United States, who are having a truck driving shortage, and let me just fill you in on something. I don't know how often you guys are around some immigrant communities, but at least here in Indiana, I'll just give my personal perspective and my lived experience. So this may be different places, different contexts, but maybe it resonates with some of you guys. I had to sell cars for a year before I got into my PhD program. So after my master's degree to my PhD program, unfortunately, I needed to make money, didn't get into the program I thought I was going to. And so I had to sell cars at a big car lot. It was a GMC Buick dealership. And then we had a used car lot as well. And one of the things that I witnessed was there was a family that came. They were Sikh, so Indian, northern India, Punjab. The Punjab, they speak Punjabi. The religion is Sikhism. It's a mixture between Hinduism and Islam. And there's a large community that has immigrated, and they've been putting them on the south side of Indianapolis, and they have an entire neighborhood that's only Sikh people, essentially. And this family would come in, and they would literally buy a car about every month to 2 months. They'd buy a new car, and we're thinking, how the heck did they get money? And they drove semi trucks, and so they would come. Harmeet, he was the first one. He got a semi truck. Then he'd bring another cousin or another brother over. They would work for him. And eventually they would just buy semi trucks until they had basically their own company. And all of them making six figures or more. And so this was one of the ways in which they became very wealthy. And they had an entire section of a neighborhood where all their family had bought houses and lived next to each other. And so I'm saying this is a strategy. It's a very good strategy, actually. It was very profitable for these particular immigrants to focus on truck driving. Now, my point, bringing this up and connecting it back to the LA riots, is what happens when, let's say, the trucking industry becomes automated, and let's say that this becomes like quite substantial and common in the next year, 2 years, 3 years. What are all these immigrant communities that are coming here and truck driving? What are they going to do? Well, it's going to displace more and more people in regards to jobs, which is absolutely detrimental. And it moves to the next point of the technocratic control. And we're already seeing people on both the right and left offer this, which is the UBI, Universal Basic Income. Oh, you don't have a job anymore? The technology is taking your ability to make a living away? Don't worry, we're the government. We'll give you money. You'll be dependent on us. And we're already seeing this kind of begin to spread. And so I just want to show you some of these latest developments in regards to what's going on with technology. Fusion-based quantum computation. This is something that I was finding on Nature. This is, again, February of 2 years ago. It's talking about the rise of quantum computing and its power and ability. This is, again, unlocking the potential of autonomous trucking, Uber Freight. So Uber is already, again, working with Volvo. Volvo has some of this technology, as I showed you in the first one. And again, they're expecting this to begin to take a prominent role in the very near future. This is an AI that I was watching a guy use, in which can build like websites for you and do all types of things. This is an AI crawler. This is, again, then this gets into what I want to talk about regarding the death of the internet, because I have this video here that we're not going to watch all of it. It's about Palantir. I may just share the link with you guys, not even cover it. We are going to watch these first two sections on Peter Thiel and JD Vance by Whitney Webb, and then her discussion on Thiel and Palantir to give you an idea of what's going on. But then we're going to dive into this interview that got millions of views, 2.3 million views in the last 4 weeks. I've watched the first half of it. I thought it was pretty interesting, but it's all kind of coming together. And what I mean by that is this weekend, I just took my wife on a date night. We went and watched the latest Mission Impossible. So what is the latest Mission Impossible about? Well, really, it's the second part of a two-part series, the last two Mission Impossibles, in which the whole premise is that there is an AI called the Entity that has grown and has become essentially self-conscious, self-aware, and is manipulating information on the internet and changing everything and distorting everything, so everybody lives in a false reality that the Entity has created. And then there's this war between intelligence agencies to try to get control of the AI. Anyway, this is the whole thing in which Tom Cruise, Ethan Hunt is trying to annihilate or end or stop this entity from taking total control. But the premise is that the internet itself, the digital environment itself, is totally corrupt because the AI is deliberately doing this. And then the premise is that it's destroying truth. And in the attempt to destroy truth and facts, the only thing that exists is power, of which the technologies will have. And so when I bring up this article like the AI crawlers, it threatens to make the web more closed for everyone. This is talking about how people are going to have to move, for example, like us right here, doing a live stream. Small content creators, everybody that's not a corporation is essentially going to have to move to paywalls, because the amount of these AI agents and these AI crawlers is so intense that it's shrinking the internet, because people don't know who they're engaging with and all this fake information, AI generated videos and images. And then the people you're engaging with aren't even real either. They may be part of some bot farm. And so the only way to solve this is essentially move your community and your content behind a paywall, in which, again, they may be nefarious actors, but at least they're human. They've gone through a process. And that's kind of what this article is talking about. And this is essentially why I talked about the death of the internet. The Entity in Mission Impossible kills the internet in the sense that you cannot trust anything on it, because all the information is being scattered and being altered. And my point is we are entering a point right now that is very, very similar to that. And that the message of Mission Impossible is prescient. Now, it already assumes a sentient AI and all this different stuff, and kind of goes beyond the scope of current AI, at least from my understanding, but it plays into the narrative that the transhumanists and the technocrats believe is going to be our future. So the internet itself, the ability to spread information, is going to be curtailed, because anybody, anything you come in contact with, how do you know that it's true? You're not going to be able to. And so unless you're in a private community that you have somewhat of a trust level with, and even the information being spread there that people believe to be true may not be. But what we're doing is, in a sense, we're bringing reality back to God's creation, because this is going to be the only thing that is unalterable. Right now, if you get Neuralink, they may be able to alter your perception of physical reality, but this is all happening, and it's happening very quick. And so Nvidia, for example, their stock was going up, and everybody's telling you to invest in Nvidia. Why? Because of their latest technology. What is accelerated quantum supercomputing? Implements a new model of computing with potential impact across industries, turning quantum computers into useful QPUs into useful quantum computers means integrating them with the state-of-the-art AI supercomputers. And NVIDIA is working on the QPU developers to build such useful. So if you go further into it, here's what they're doing. NVIDIA powers world's largest quantum research supercomputer. Here, let me share some of these articles with you guys too, so you guys can kind of dive into it all. Screwed Up Nevsky throws in $2. He says, everybody is blackpilling about Palantir and AI. Well, I don't think my goal is not to bring a black pill. My goal of today is just to make people a little bit more aware and just have a little bit discernment in regards to the things that are occurring before our eyes. So, for example, Trump this week announced the relationship with Palantir or last week with the super database and being able to track everybody. And then all of a sudden his base, generally the MAGA base, was very unsupportive of it because they're worried about centralized control. They're worried about the loss of all privacy. Again, not that we really have any right now, but at least they're under the perception that they do. And so they were kind of a little bit frustrated with this idea of Palantir and having access and total control to everybody's data. And so what happens? Well, all of a sudden the riot breaks out, and it's all about immigration. And then in the same week, we hear JD Vance talk about how Palantir will be able to track everybody in the country, and we could essentially identify every illegal. And we see the narrative begin to seep in. And so that's the point today, is not to be scared of AI, not to black pill about all technology. It's about to have discernment to see that where we're at is a very interesting point in regards to the trajectory of all these technologies and what they're expected and anticipated to do. And so this is, again, NVIDIA's new quantum research supercomputer. This was the Psi Quantum. One of my buddies, we were in a members meeting, and sent me this, and I'll share this with you guys. This is a little bit on how these quantum computers are supposed to work. And then Elon Musk gushes over Optimus robot as Tesla shows off its ability to learn from humans. This has to do with, and I actually wrote about this in my dissertation, is that one of the features of contemporary AI is they had to focus. So about 5 years ago, they ran into a problem, or a little bit more than that probably, but at least real effort was devoted, because AI had a very difficult problem orienting itself in physical space. So it did great in regards to, just like you engage with OpenAI or ChatGPT, answering questions, filtering through data, finding pattern recognitions, doing all this, LLMs. But what AI had a real tough problem doing was orienting itself in the physical environment and being able to do just kind of monotonous daily tasks. And so tons of research, really for the last decade, has been in the Moravec sense. Hans Moravec was all about AI and robotics, and he believed the robots were the entity of the future. He believed that they were a superior evolutionary entity to you and me, and that they would inherit the kingdom, the singularity, the new Jerusalem to come, what I would refer to as the Babylon, the Tower of Babel, the new Babylon. But he was very, very excited about AI robots. Well, now a lot of investment has gone into trying to get AI, put them in a physical body so that it can, or again, whether you call a robot a physical body, well, that's the way that they talk about it. Put it in some type of form of a physical embodiment, and then program it to try to learn the way a child learns from observation, right? So try to program the AI so it mimics learning patterns the way that animals and babies and small children can learn through observation. And that's what Tesla AI has essentially been able to do, and that's what is making it sort of the leader in AI robotics right now. So just connecting all those dots. Tesla Optimus robot learns new task, Musk predicts historic impact. So you guys get it. Now today, Musk tweeted actually, so this was in response to talking about type 1 civilizations. Now remember, these people are transhumanists. They're technocrats. Elon Musk's biggest drive, at least according to him, is to try to go to Mars. Now, I don't even believe that's actually possible. And so this riff with Donald Trump, like today or yesterday, he was saying, you know, we have the spaceships. So who gives a shit? Like what? But they're talking about a type 1 civilization. A type 1 civilization is one that is spacefaring, one that is multiplanetary. And so it says a type 1 civilization capable of harnessing and utilizing all the energy available on its home planet, including all forms of renewable and non-renewable energy. This would require global cooperation and advanced technology to manage planetary resources efficiently. So, okay, so meaning all resources are going to be managed by the AI, just like what we're seeing with our military is things are increasingly being managed by Palantir, or at least in some regards. To manage planetary resources efficiently, estimated energy use, 10 to the 16th watts. Humanity is currently below type 1, roughly a 0.7 on the scale, as we don't yet fully harness Earth's energy. And of course, Elon responds, actually, humanity is only about 1% of the way towards a type 1 civilization. We could generate at least 2 orders of magnitude more electricity than we do now. And then Chris Langan, I don't know if you guys know who he is. He is considered to be the man with the highest IQ in the world. He's like a former bouncer. He has some opinions that may veer on the edge of transgressing the TOS of YouTube. So he's very outspoken about race, about ethnicity, about European peoples. And so Chris Langan says, but the question is, and I thought this was prescient, who cares aside from a few tech-minded investors, right? Who does care? Why is it that our entire civilization is oriented to becoming spacefaring, to becoming a technocratic centralized control grid? Oh, you're right. It is just a handful of billionaires that already have monetary control and immense power. Most of the tech presently available is nearly useless, and most people, and suboptimal at best, better technologies were displaced by worse ones, regress the world to 1970 and lose the migrant half of the U.S. population. And we have a much better, more stable, and more humane country and world, as I seem to recall. All that tech does is increase pollution. True. We've seen this very paradoxical phenomenon that as technologies advanced, that somehow we're causing more and more pollution despite this constant meta-narrative of, well, global freezing. That was the 70s. That was the early 80s. By the mid-80s, we start hearing it's global warming. Oh, my God, all the ice is going to melt. Oh, my God, Manhattan's going to be underwater. It's going to be underwater in 2001. It's going to be underwater in 2010. It's going to be underwater in 2020. And yet the water stayed the same. And so now it's just called climate change. But we've seen this weird paradox where all this advanced technology hasn't done away with pollution. In fact, they use that as a narrative to talk about how they need more technology to limit pollution while it's doing the exact opposite. Bloat of the super rich as the rest. I mean, what was 2020? 2020 was the most successful year. If you were on Wall Street, if you were a billionaire, if you're an investor, I mean, Silicon Valley, Wall Street, and then the billionaire class, 2020 was the best year on record. So the year that people were forced to stay at home, the year that people lost their businesses, the people in control made the most money. Of humanity gets, and then of course, in the rest of humanity gets poor. We've seen this to be the case after 2020, and it certainly was already the case moving forward. I mean, we can look back at the financial crisis of 2008, and so on and so forth. Facilitate surveillance. And that's exactly what they're trying to tell us now. We're supposed to support our own prison state, essentially, is what they're trying to do with convince us that Palantir, basically being the Patriot Act 2.0, is really a good idea. And so Palantir is claiming that it can stop crime before it happens. Well, how do you do that, Palantir? Oh, We just document and track every single thing you do from every piece of information we have and get much of it from the intelligence agencies themselves. And we just have the proprietary software to filter it and apply it in various different methods and means. So we're being sold that a Patriot Act 2.0 is somehow conservative. It's somehow part of the Trump MAGA movement. What? No. And of course, again, we're going to get into it. Peter Thiel, the mentor of JD Vance, Peter Thiel, the homosexual German American, who we did a stream, him talking about Christianity. And turns out he claims to be a Christian, but he's not very Christian, doesn't believe in a historical resurrection, doesn't believe in the incarnation of God. It's more like a Petersonian archetypal symbolic pattern of usefulness. And of course, he described, and if you guys can go back, if you just look up my YouTube channel, put in Peter Thiel or something, we did a whole thing. It was a Hoover Institute interview. And again, there's like no morality there. It's just for him, it's like not woke progressive postmodernism or something. And therefore, it's a little bit more interesting and useful because it kind of keeps the guardrails on society better. That's essentially his Christianity. And we've seen his allyship with conservative movements, generally speaking. I mean, there's obviously Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, Mark Andreessen, the Winklevoss brothers. The list goes on and on. I mean, much of the Silicon elite have kind of shifted gears and they've always been kind of libertarian. I mean, I would argue, I mean, clearly, like Thiel and Musk, these people are still liberal in regards to social values. Yeah, they may not like the castration of children. Musk has been speaking out openly about, what didn't he have a son that's changed his name to Vivian or something and identifies as a woman or something like that? So he's been outspoken about the trans issue, but as I said, he's the ultimate gaslighter. He does one thing and then does the opposite. So he's upset about Vivian being a girl, but then when he had the baby with Grimes and named it X, the little boy that goes around with him everywhere, he names him like these weird characters X. And then Grimes said that they weren't going to assign him a gender, that he was going to be able to choose in the future. Now, obviously, Trump's portraying him as a boy and all this different stuff, but Musk is a gaslighter. I have a whole stream on how Elon Musk is not your friend. I do recommend going back because I document a whole list of issues in which Musk will say one thing and then he'll also say something else or do the opposite. And so it's like he's always gaslighting. And we can see the same thing. I mean, I don't know. I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are on the rift between Musk and Trump. What do you think really caused it? I'm not totally sure. There's a rumor that the black eye that Musk had, what was it, like a week or two ago when he received some reward, that him and Besant got into a physical altercation in the White House. Could have been. Not sure. But him then claiming that Trump was on the Epstein list, it just seems so weird because we have all these photos of Musk, both with Jeffrey Epstein and certainly with Ghislaine Maxwell. Does he mind speaking a little bit about that? Musk is really big on the problem with depopulation, but then all of his technologies are focused on automotive, AI, and then implanting these into your brain through Neuralink. So this is not focused on solving the problems of humanity. It's creating businesses and the formation to lead us into this sort of technocratic world that they all see. So that's what we're talking about today, and realizing that the forces that are trying to control us, the forces that are going to use Palantir and AI to subvert really our freedom and our autonomy, it's coming both from the Republican and the Democrats, right? This is not some fight between the good guys and the bad guys. That's the point of the discernment that I hope to provide you guys with today, and just talk more in depth about some of these dangers, about the shrinking of the internet, about all the misinformation, about, again, Palantir is a big one that we're seeing the federal government support the idea of mass data collection of private U.S. citizens to protect us. And of course, anytime the government tells you that they're doing something to protect us, it usually means that it's tarnishing or diminishing any sense of liberty that we might have or autonomy. So this is what we're going to be getting into today, guys. So smash that like. Really appreciate all you guys being here. Again, thank you so much. Screwed Up Nevsky throws in $2. Hope to not black pill anybody. Again, that's why you got to have Christ. Stay away from the black pill. Siege D, shout out to you, brother. He throws in $10. Says, random question, DPH. If I convert to Orthodoxy, can I still keep all of the Roman Catholic stuff my dad passed down to me, such as his rosary and St. Michael the Archangel picture? Yeah, bro. Absolutely. Just because you're Orthodox doesn't mean you can't have items that are sentimental to your parents or something that your father gave you. And there's nothing wrong with owning a rosary per se, or a Western depiction of St. Michael the Archangel. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about that. Obviously, going to Catholic churches, any attempt to participate in Catholic sacraments, that would be a big no-no, right? Because the Catholics recognize us. They say, oh yeah, the Orthodox, all their sacraments are legitimate and ours are too. So, if you're Orthodox, you can come to a Catholic church and take the Eucharist. And Orthodox, we say, no, their sacraments are not valid. Only ours are. So, in regards to, sentimental memorabilia from your father, like, no, bro, you're totally fine. Don't worry about that. You're good to go. So, but I will say a prayer for you, CHD. It's wonderful to hear about you converting to Orthodoxy. God bless you, brother. Hope you're doing well. Unlikable douchebag throws in 5. Says, I was flipping bricks for Mansa Musa before you were even a type 1 cell. Oh, that's good. That's good. I like that. Okay, next one. Screwed Up Nevsky throws another 2. Says, I'm dotarded, by the way. Lord have mercy on me. Well, thank you very much for the support, Screwed Up Nevsky. And Red Fox throws in a generous $100. Thank you so much, Red Fox. He says, DPH, if anything, you're underselling it. I used a couple of DoD's Palantir AI software. You can deep dive any military record across programs of record. Look into Vantage and Maven. This is all trending towards augmented reality, Neuralink, VR, aka transhuman futurist agenda. It absolutely is. And that's where the reason why I'm doing the stream today is because Saturday night, I took my wife to see Mission Impossible. And I'd already been thinking about this stuff. I already watched, again, some of the videos that I'm going to share with you guys today. But it just felt like, in light of the Palantir and then, of course, the LA riots, and then I'm hearing JD Vance. I didn't see the clip till like Saturday or Sunday yesterday about the JD Vance on the Theo Von, like trying to kind of sell Palantir. So he's like, oh, I hear you, Theo. I hear you. Yeah, that's certainly worrisome. But, Palantir can certainly, it can document or track every person in the country. So we don't have to worry about illegal immigrants anymore. It's like, oh, okay. So you get rid of the illegals as long as I give up all autonomy and privacy to my life and anything on the internet. Oh, okay. Yeah, no thanks. So I'm with you, Red Fox. If anything, I probably am underselling it. But the Neuralink, where they're talking and where they're trying to take us, I mean, was it the World Economic Forum has been talking about being in your pod. You're not going to own anything and you're going to like it for what, at least 5 years? 5 years, they're telling you that you won't be able to own anything, which is what? Another form of autonomy. So what we're seeing is satanic. It is demonic, because the whole goal is to take away any sort of autonomy and privacy that you have, which is, again, part of being human. I mean, how can you be human if you have zero privacy? You can't. You can't. And that's why we have all these military experiments through the communist era and whatnot of torturing people, essentially taking away any sort of privacy. And in a sense, that's what we are moving into, our own gulag. And in many ways, I think we should see what's happening in our society as a soft Bolshevik revolution. Now, it's not against Marxist, devout Marxists or something like that. But it is a false dialectic. Like, I'd be very curious to know, for example, in LA with these riots, as what happened with the George Floyd riots, pallets of bricks just happen to show up where all the protesters are. Of course, there's been investigation into that, 4 or 5 years ago now, 2020, summer of 2020. And it's NGOs, right? It's these NGOs, it's these private organizations that are actually funding and maneuvering the logistics of bringing like weapons to these protesters. I find it very interesting that it happened the week that Palantir and Trump administration have come to some sort of agreement. And then again, Vance putting forth the idea that somehow Palantir can solve things that we're seeing and witnessing in LA. So, yeah, I'm all over the place. But thank you so much, Red Fox. Really appreciate that, my brother. God bless you. And Screwed Up Nevsky throws in another 5. Thank you so much, brother. Really support that. Really appreciate that support. And then let me just double check over on Streamlabs. Okay. So what I want to get into first and foremost is I want to watch this little video here. We're going to play this whole section. It's about, let's see, probably about 15 minutes or so. And it's, again, this woman, I have no idea who this is. Mint Press News, no idea. But this was one of the better interviews, more recent interviews I saw of Whitney Webb talking specifically about JD Vance, Peter Thiel, and Palantir. So we're going to kind of play this all the way to the 18-minute mark.
Yeah, absolutely. So JD Vance really owes both his political career and his previous venture capital career to Peter Thiel. For example, Peter Thiel first met JD Vance when JD Vance was in law school, and subsequently offered him his first job in venture capital at a Thiel created venture capital firm called Mithril Capital. After that, Vance went on to become involved with AOL co-founder Steve Case and Revolution Ventures, and managed a fund there called Rise of the Rest, I believe, which was heavily funded by the Walton family behind Walmart, Jeff Bezos, and a lot of prominent figures of the American oligarchy, and subsequently started his own venture capital firm, Narya Capital, with heavy backing again from Peter Thiel and also from Eric Schmidt, who's a major actually donor to Biden and intimately involved in Biden's science and tech policy. And actually, the two of them are on the steering committee of the rather infamous Bilderberg conference, interestingly enough. And in addition, when Vance decided to run for office or for Senate, he was heavily funded by Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel donated $15 million to his campaign, which I believe at the time, and maybe still is, the largest donation, a single donation ever made to a Senate candidate. And then JD Vance ran initially sort of as a never Trumper and was very anti-Trump. And he became his vice presidential pick, arguably because that rocky relationship was soothed over by Peter Thiel personally, who took and accompanied JD Vance to Trump's Mar-a-Lago to sort of smooth over that relationship. And then Vance sort of became a big Trump proponent. Arguably, there's a lot of people have referred to Vance as a Peter Thiel protege, and I think, given the evidence, that's pretty fair. But Peter Thiel has several proteges. Vance is one in politics now, and obviously prominent in the Republican Party. But other noteworthy proteges include people like Sam Altman of OpenAI and WorldCoin, and also Palmer Luckey of the defense startup Anduril, and also of Oculus Rift, the virtual reality system that was sold to Facebook, which Peter Thiel, was on the board of from like 2005 until 2022, when he left to try and get Trump-aligned candidates elected. So Peter Thiel's important for a lot of reasons. I would I guess start off with Peter Thiel by noting that he co-founded PayPal. And so PayPal is sort of one of these ubiquitous, financial sort of like fintech websites, one of the pioneers of the field, rather. And, from its earliest days, people that were involved in setting up PayPal, which includes people like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk, it's been said, but the people who were making that company alongside them, that they were in discussions with intelligence agencies and federal agencies from the very beginning about what, those entities were, what they would support in a fintech company, essentially. And, as I reported back when I wrote for Mint Press, the involvement of the now PayPal owner of the who created The Intercept and sort of privatized these Snowden leaks. And a lot of them ended up, never coming out. Allegedly, some of the ones that never came out documented in detail PayPal's relationship to intelligence that has supposedly been ongoing for some time. But aside from PayPal, the clear indicator of intelligence ties with Peter Thiel comes in the form of Palantir, which he incorporated in 2003, but which didn't really start as a company around 2004, 2005. Its first funder was the CIA's venture capital arm, COTEL. The CIA was its only client until 2008. And between 2005 and 2009, the top engineers at Palantir say they made over 200 visits to CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia.
God. You guys are ruthless. You guys are absolutely ruthless. I cannot believe you would say something like that, Mr. Flesh Helmet. Oh, gosh.
Where the CIA directly guided and tweaked, their software products, which are now used by intelligence agencies around the world, as well as healthcare agencies. The HHS and CDC in the U.S. use Palantir, so does the UK's NHS, and it's expanded really throughout the world. What is really arguably a CIA front company, as I've written in past reports on Palantir, the reason, or rather what Alex Karp and Peter Thiel were interested in doing when they created Palantir was essentially privatizing the Total Information Awareness program that had just been defunded by Congress. Total information awareness is sort of an outgrowth of the Reagan-Bush era of domestic surveillance schemes, some of which came up during the Iran-Contra proceedings and are linked to things like the continuity of government protocols and the main core database, which are efforts to sort of label people, label domestic dissidents as subversives, based on their online activity. And of course, in the 80s, it was based on other metrics, but now it's your online activity. So whatever data the NSA, for example, hoovers up about you, Palantir decides whether you're deemed subversive or not. And given the continuity of government protocols, which are still on the books, if the US government decides to invoke those, which can be under very vague circumstances, these people labeled subversives by Palantirs could have their constitutional rights suspended if those protocols are ever invoked. So Palantir's role in that, as far as the national security state goes, very nefarious, and they've been very involved in a lot of, other aspects of governance. It's gotten, increasingly bloated and large with over the years. It was intimately involved in Ukrainian military operations during the Ukraine-Russian conflict. That's, of course, still ongoing. And
I guarantee you, because if you guys don't know what happened regarding Ukraine last week, is they had this year-long military offensive where they had all these drones tucked away within these semi-trucks that had removable tops on them, and drove them deep into Russia, like near the Siberia. So this is past Moscow. And apparently they had been there for months. So Russia didn't suspect anything. And then once the operation was activated, thousands and thousands of these drones that had explosives on them began attacking some of their military equipment. As I said, mostly airplanes that drop nuclear weapons. And they claim that they knocked out like 3/4, and then it was a third of their. No, it wasn't as big of a defeat against Russia as the Western media was telling us. But it did cause, at least from what I read of credible sources that are in Russia, or at least negotiate, or in those milieus, know that language, they said it's about $7 to $8 billion worth of damage. So they did cause a massive amount of damage. And of course, there was an attack on a train and civilians were injured. There was multiple other attacks, not just the military equipment. And so my point bringing all this stuff up, we know that Palantir is working on the side of Ukraine and utilizing some of their new AI technology to explore and see how effective it is on the battlefield. We know for a fact, Palantir is very open about this, that they are the ones that are aiding the IDF and coordinating their attacks on Gaza. So Palantir is deeply embedded with the military-industrial complex and essentially, again, this new world order. And I don't, and the CEO of Palantir, Alex Karp, he brags about how our technology does a lot of things and sometimes it kills our enemies, and he thinks that's funny. But again, imagine it's not so far out of fantasy that maybe your criticism of Israel, we've seen all this anti-Semitic legislation and bills being put forth by the Trump administration. What was R.F. Kennedy Jr.'s first 2 posts as the leader of HHS was about on anti-Semitism. So as I said, the MAGA movement is a collaboration between Zionism, Israel, AIPAC, Christian Zionist, MAGA, which is a general populist, nationalist political orientation, and then the technocracy, the oligarchs, techno oligarchs, and this is essentially the 2.0 Trump administration. So, how can Trump talk about ending the war in Ukraine and Russia when we're still funding Ukraine? And then Palantir, who he's again doing deals with, close friends with Peter Thiel, JD Vance, the protege of Thiel, is literally working with Ukraine on the battlefield, literally working with Israel on the battlefield. I mean, come on, like these are not neutral parties. And I hope Trump does something regarding ending the Ukraine-Russian conflict and certainly the potential war with Iran, but it doesn't look good. And I don't know what cards he holds. What's he going to do? Sanction Russia more? The only option he has is like the use of military, which he keeps telling us he doesn't want to do. So what's he going to do? I mean, it doesn't look like Netanyahu's listening. What, they organized a ceasefire for 30 days, and then Netanyahu's like, yeah, I'm done with that. Going back to killing people. And what's the U.S. done? Nothing. So that's where we have to take off our rose-tinted colored glasses when we're talking about MAGA, when we're talking about domestic politics, that they can certainly have policies we agree with, but we have to realize that the powers that be are on both sides of the political aisle, and that unfortunately, what I'm seeing is the escalation of the technocracy and their surveillance system around us is increasing under the Trump administration. Now, do I want all the illegal immigrants tracked and deported? Absolutely. But I don't want my privacy and my autonomy to be diminished because of it, which is the whole larger point.
Are now playing an outsized role in Israel's war on Gaza, which is, as I'm sure Mint Press viewers know, is using AI to mass murder entire families. And Palantir is openly a big part of that, and they're very proud of that. And even when Peter Thiel was asked about that quite recently, he said his bias was to defer to Israel as it relates to the use of AI, this AI-powered war machine that's committing genocide in the Gaza Strip. And there's a lot of other things to say about Palantir too. I mean, this company really has a nefarious history. One of the things that a lot of people forget about them is that they created the first plan pitched to the federal government to destroy WikiLeaks and sort of what they called the WikiLeaks threat and stop national security leak-based reporting. Talked about targeting people like Julian Assange and Glenn Greenwald specifically.
And so if they're wanting to go, again, get the money from the military-industrial complex from the U.S. government so they can attack WikiLeaks, you think they really care about, the causes of the MAGA movement or the people of the U.S.? No, of course not. And if you're deemed anti-Semitic or you're a right-wing radical, you don't think Palantir and all this technology is going to be used against you? It absolutely is. I just read an article today coming out of China talking about all the people that have been banned from their social credit score. So they either said something, they did something, they violated whatever it is that the CCP has going on in regards to their regulations of your engagement online. And they shut down their bank, they took their home, they took everything they own. And this was talking about how China has a growing homelessness problem, because the homelessness, it's not from people because, they're drug addicts and they never want to work or what. No. These were people actually with jobs. These were people with homes. These were people that had wrongthink. The Chinese government took everything from them. And now they're essentially having areas around China where all these homeless people are living because they can't work. They're ostracized due to the social credit system. You don't think Palantir wants to do that here? You don't think again, Peter Thiel's been very outspoken against, harsh memes and criticisms of the LGBTQ movement. Now, he's not pro-trans, but he is an open homosexual. You don't think that some of those people may use this technology to deem that your traditional Christian beliefs may be wrongthink? Absolutely they would.
So this is a company that doesn't value freedom of speech or freedom or your privacy or really, any constitutional right you have. And they directly enable, the warrantless spying on all Americans and use that to profile you on behalf of the national security state. And what's unfortunate too is that, we know how Peter Thiel's influence during Trump's first campaign translated into Palantir getting what the New York Times called a bonanza of contracts with the military, the U.S. military, and also with, even more so with U.S. intelligence. And now we also have, the other PayPal co-founder, Elon Musk, now deepening his ties with intelligence agencies through SpaceX, and which was, of course, already technically an intelligence contractor because Space Force is both part of the military and also an intelligence agency. And so really what you're seeing here is this particular faction of oligarchs, sometimes referred to so-called PayPal mafia, which have their tendrils deeply embedded in both parties. You may have Peter Thiel and Republican, but you'll have Reid Hoffman and Pierre Omidyar on the Democrat side, for example, and then Elon Musk also now on the Republican side. But really, these are people that build de facto monopolies in direct connection with the U.S. national security state. And if you look at Palantir, it's very clear they care very little about our constitutional rights and freedoms. And despite perhaps, the rhetoric they may espouse publicly. And, it's very unfortunate that so many people believe with how they frame themselves rhetorically, because it goes very...
Somebody mentioned I should have Luke Smith on. I've been actually thinking about that. I watched a couple of his videos and I was wanting to, do you guys know how to contact him? What's the best way to reach out to Luke because from my understanding, I watched a little bit of his interview with Ortho Kyle. I believe he's like Orthodox Christian. I'd love to have him on the channel to talk about culture and things that are going on. I know he had a background in academia and stuff like that. So if you guys follow him or if he's live, let him know I want to chat with him. And if anybody knows the best way to contact him, please let me, email. What's his email? Like, I appreciate you telling me use email, but what's his email? That's what I mean. Like, how do you actually contact him? Check his website. All right, I'll check his website. Yeah, I'll just reach out to Orthodox Kyle and see how he contacted him, and see if I can set something up. I'd love to chat with Luke. Seems like a pretty sharp guy. So, yeah, he posted just an hour ago. Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know. I don't follow him that closely, but I watched a few of his videos as of recent. I thought, man, that'd be a cool guy to have a conversation with. So if he's live or if you guys come across how to contact him, let me know. But I'll reach out to Ortho Kyle and see if I can get his email.
Against their actions. For example, Peter Thiel is often referred to by others as a libertarian, but this is someone who says that he doesn't like free market competition because competition can negatively impact profits, and openly promotes the idea of, quartering a market and building a monopoly. And when he's done that, which he has, he's done it in direct collaboration from the very beginning with the U.S. national security state. So I would not call that libertarian. I think it's quite clearly fascist.
So, in conclusion, it seems that J.D. Vance is basically a patsy for Thiel and will represent Palantir's CIA tech empire interests.
Well, I think it's quite clear if you look at, just American politicians in general over the last 100 years plus, they tend to serve their biggest donors, correct? And are influenced by their donors. And that's why, follow the money has always been so important when you're reporting on political realities or political figures in the United States. And I think it's abundantly clear that J.D. Vance has those kind of very deep connections to Peter Thiel, and his political career and his venture capitalist career would not have existed if it were not for him. And it's also important to point out that after the vice presidential announcement, you have close allies of Peter Thiel, whether it's Elon Musk, or David Sachs, or Palmer Luckey, or Palantir itself, a Palantir co-founder alongside Thiel named Joe Lonsdale, all beginning to dump millions of dollars per month in the same super PAC that's supporting the Trump-Vance ticket, only after that VP announcement was made. So clearly it seems like that particular network is quite convinced that Vance is going to be their guy. when in office. And it's worth pointing out that a lot of these guys are very interested in dominating the digital financial system to come. For example, Elon Musk says that he plans to turn X, Twitter, into half of the financial system. And JD Vance has been on the Senate Banking Committee. He's involved in crypto regulation legislation that's being written and drafted. And going to be put before Congress. And it's very likely that he'll be involved in choosing the kingmakers of that, like, PayPal's very own recently launched stablecoin.
And this was always my theory. You guys can go back. I got receipts on my YouTube channel. Literally, when Elon Musk was acquiring Twitter, I was saying, why would he want to do that? People kept saying, well, he's a free speech absolutist. He wants to restore freedom of expression to the American people. And I said, no, like, don't you guys listen to his transhumanism? Don't you guys listen to what he actually says? And he's never said this, but this was always my speculation. You go back to streams 2-3 years ago and see that this was my opinion. The reason why he wanted X or Twitter was for the data, was for the information. You don't think Grok, you don't think XAI or Tesla AI is siphoning through every post, everything you're looking at, how long you're looking at it, and monitoring global conversations in every part of the planet that has access to X? You don't think that this was a way in which he could extend the Overton window to see what people's thoughts are and that they could begin to document it and create profiles on people? You really think that that Elon Musk bought Twitter so that you can post Jew memes, Nazi memes, Hitler memes? Are you serious? Like, no, this is about data. This is about control. This is about moving us towards the next stage of globalism and technocracy. And he, as Whitney was highlighting, he wants to make X the American or the Western WeChat. It is going to be where your social credit score is. It is going to be your bank, your social media, your everything, just like WeChat in China is. And so, come on, guys. We have to just see what's actually happening and who the powers that be are. Yeah, exactly. He said this, and people still think that he bought it so that they can like spurg out on the internet. No, that's not why he bought it, dude. He bought it for your data, and I'm on it, and I post stuff, and I post my thoughts. So, do you think there's an account? Absolutely, there's an account on me, and we've already seen how petty he can be with people that have criticized him, losing their monetization on X, being shadow banned on X. There's people that were pretty going hard in the paint on certain topics that are really close to Elon. These were some of the accounts were large accounts. I don't even know who they are, but I saw that they were speaking out that all of a sudden their monetization on X is shut off. Huh. I thought the whole thing was that X was going to be a superior platform to YouTube. It was going to be a superior platform to all these other social medias, and that everybody was going to be able to make money. Oh, okay. I see what's going on now. I see.
And any of these others, companies and currencies that they're, intimately connected to.
So it sounds like what you're talking about is being pushed by a PayPal mafia, an Orwellian, programmable, and surveillance money system that you've written quite extensively about. And how will the Trump administration advance this financial tech monopoly system?
I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have heard about the move into central bank digital currencies, for example, or CBDCs. And there's been a lot of criticism around those because of the idea of it being programmable, surveillable money. But for money to be programmable and surveillable, it doesn't necessarily have to be issued by a central bank. It can be also issued by the private sector. And you can add that same type of Orwellian surveillance and the concerns about programmability, deciding what you can or can't buy based on various metrics, or based on your online activity, or the claims of a coming social credit system, and all of that. You can have that issued by the private sector, no problem. And so there's been efforts to sort of digitalize to make a digital dollar in the United States.
I love this bitter clinger. He goes, wait, Elon didn't buy X for free speech? I find that hard to believe. Next, you're going to tell me the brain chimps aren't really for paraplegics. No, they're not. And in fact, what I recently saw is that Neuralink has kind of changed their rhetoric. So I did streams like 2 or 3 years ago. I actually did a long stream on brain implants, the history of brain implants, talking about Dr. Jose Delgado and all the horrendous stuff he did down in Louisiana, experimenting on children and different people. Anyways, in that, I remember going to Neuralink, and it may not have been in the stream, but maybe prep for that stream. And I remember Neuralink was very explicit. It was about human AI symbiosis, right? The whole point, I mean, you went to their website, the mission statement was there. Oh, okay. Looks like internet's still working. Not sure what happened there. We still live, guys? You guys see me? Uh-oh. Palantir's after me, guys.
What you can or can't.
Palantir's after me. Lost my train of thought. That Neuralink, their mission statement was explicitly about AI human symbiosis and about taking humanity to the next level of intelligence. Now you go to it and it's about restoring sight to the blind. It's about helping the paraplegics be able to control their computers, and you know, to give them credit, they are demonstrating the ability to help people in these conditions, which again, for me as an Orthodox Christian, is like an inversion of Christ's miracles. And this is a touchy situation. Does it mean that if you're blind, you don't use Neuralink to restore sight? You know, it's hard to say, yeah, if you're blind, you know, don't do that because the mark of the beast is the next step. But you can see where it's going. You can see that people, once Neuralink and again, allowing AI access to people's brains, and then they're going to show, oh, look, you can control your computer. You can control all your gadgets wirelessly. Look how smart these people are. You know, Peter Thiel is big on, there's a new sort of Olympic Games that's going to happen this summer. It's like, I forget, it's like the Human Enhancement Games, which is going to allow people to, you know, do steroids. So like one of the Olympic swimmers for Australia is in it, and he's been on steroids and he looks ginormous. Like the comparison between him and that, like, it was, I forget which Olympic Games he was in, between when he was competing for a medal versus him now, he's like twice as big, if not three. I mean, he's ginormous. But Peter Thiel has been big on promoting like Olympic Games through enhancement. Okay, so people can use testosterone and steroids, but what is the end goal? The end goal is total augmentation of the human being to see what is the, you know, well, now we have a transhuman in the competition for the marathon runner or something like that. And it's going to normalize supernatural capabilities through enhancement. Right now, they're allowing people to take steroids. Okay. But soon it's going to be actual transhuman. It's going to be actual augmentation of the physical body and then putting them into competition to see how it competes. And so all this stuff is here. So just as like Bitter Klinger said, no, Neuralink is not just to help the paraplegics. Yes, in a sense, they are doing that. That's quite clear. You can actually see that medical research. But that's not the point. And that was never the point. And you can even go back. I remember in that stream, I went back to the Neuralink, like the first test when they did the 2 different pigs. The whole thing was about AI being the human brain. It had nothing to do with, well, I mean, it did. They talked about the steps along the way with the paraplegics and the blind and this type of stuff. But that's just steps along the way to where they actually want to go.
Can't buy based on various metrics, or, you know, based on your online activity, or, you know, the claims of a coming social credit system and all of that. You can have that issued by the private sector, no problem. And so there's been efforts to sort of digitalize, to make a digital dollar in the United States. And there's been concern that there would be a CBDC in the United States. And that's certainly been happening in other countries. But I think in the United States, it's increasingly unlikely, especially considering that you know, the Federal Reserve in the United States is essentially owned by the private Wall Street banks. And if you're, you know, a central bank digital currency, then the central bank is doing a lot of the job that Wall Street banks normally do. And Wall Street banks want to keep the two-tier system of private banking and central banking as it exists today. So they're most likely to be the issuers of that currency. And I think PayPal, in some of my recent reporting on my website, Unlimited Hangout, have focused a lot on how there's efforts by these groups that own that you know, are either ex PayPal or who currently own PayPal, to have PayPal and a lot of the companies that are intimately connected to it, for example, like Latin America's Mercado Libre, to be the rails on which all of these digital currencies will run, and to essentially dominate the field. And it's very likely that PayPal's PYUSD is going to be a major contender in that. A lot of other dollar stable coins maybe as well, like Tether, which was intimately tied up with the FTX scandal, or Circle, which has a very intimate relationship with Larry Fink's BlackRock. Any of these, but essentially which digital dollar coins are going to win. That's not going to be all.
Yes, that's exactly what I was saying earlier, MB, is that's what's coming is the UBI, and it's going to seem innocuous, and it's going to seem like this should be the path forward. But what it is total dependency on the federal government. And I am really worried about like the rolling out of the UBI. And that's exactly what they're talking about with the automation of semi-truck driving. They want to get the people that are going to be out of work on UBI. And they're saying, oh, don't worry about it. We'll still figure out a way in which you can get paid. And then you can go find training, or we'll pay for training so you can learn a new job. Well, it's funny is, what was it? 4 years ago, they were telling, well, no, it was 4. It was 4 or 5 when the trucker convoy happened. And then they're telling all the truckers, go learn the code. Well, you know what was one of the worst industries to get in right now is coding, because the AI is going to do all that. And so the irony, is that all the coders are the ones that are going to be out of a job, because that's the whole point about the singularity, is that the AI begins to build itself. And so they're trying to build these cybernetic feedback loops that the AI itself can control. And eventually that means robotics and the ability for it to build itself, which is their intention.
All be determined by regulation legislation that's being written, and has to be approved first, right, by the Senate Banking Committee, on which JD Vance sits. And so, having these particular Silicon Valley figures all tied to PayPal influence him, I think in that context, is somewhat, significant, because regulation determines the winners and the losers in the market that it's regulating, right? And so, if the people writing the bill all have ties to the same companies that want to be winners, they can be favored, right, at the legislative level, and, have their, work cut out for them, essentially, and come to dominate the market. And, PayPal has expressed for a long time they want to dominate the market. You have Peter Thiel on record saying that PayPal was created to replace the US dollar. So there's a lot of things happening here. And what you'd have, as a consequence of that, would be the people that run PayPal, who, in recent years have just been censoring people for things they've written and stuff like that. They're the ones that would be capable of programming and surveilling your money. And, that's very unfortunate, especially when you consider the connections of, someone like Piero Midyar, who owns PayPal right now, which I wrote about in Press, several years ago. And I know that Max Blumenthal also did an investigative series for Mint Press on our Piero Midyar. That's very important. I would encourage people to look at those to learn more about the people that are essentially running this company. And also, the other people that make up this particular network that is very connected to the so-called, PayPal mafia, and really the PayPal co-founders. I mean, the intelligence ties abound. And I think it's, a lot of them frame themselves as, pro-constitution, pro-freedom and all of this, but, a lot of their business decisions reflect something else entirely. And I think it's, important to warn people about this.
And so that's the end of this clip that I want to show you guys. But again, her highlighting about Palantir and PayPal, and again, the PayPal mafia, which Musk is a part of, they have deep, deep ties to, quote unquote, the deep state, at least the intelligence agencies and the military industrial complex. That's a fact. That's an absolute fact. And so that's my point with this discernment, is seeing through the facade of the MAGA Trump 2.0 administration, right? The golden age. What is the golden age? And I told you that the whole point is to make America more efficient for the transhumanist technocratic transition, which we're seeing take place right before us. So the next one that I want to talk to you guys about, and we're not going to watch this whole thing, we're going to skip through it, but this was an interview that, or sort of a conversation amongst a handful of people. Brett Weinstein's on this, and it's about the jobs that won't exist in 24 months. This is a conversation that was picking up on what I was witnessing, and what, shout out to the Eschaton Vigil. I had a private conversation with him in one of our think tank meetings. And he was noticing the same thing, that if you start watching the interviews of like everybody who leads a tech company, they're all excited for what's getting ready to happen. For example, Chat GPT, right now we have Chat GPT 4, and it's expected, the rollout of Chat GPT 5 is expected to be what they consider almost 1,000 times more intelligent. So again, what does that mean? I don't know. Can't really give you a concrete definition or understanding what exactly that means in the future. But my point is, NVIDIA apparently has some super quantum computing technology that's some type of like a black goo that allows the amount of information within a, more data and more information can be stored in a smaller area using this particular goo. And this is why NVIDIA, like, their stock's going to go up. So somebody was saying, I made money investing in Palantir. Look, I'm not here to say what's ethical or not ethical, but I'm saying the stock of Palantir, the stock of Tesla, the stock of Microsoft, the stock of Apple, all the tech stocks are going to continue to go up. So if you do want to make money, I've thought about it myself. I don't know if I want to invest in it because I don't know. I'm just not there at my heart ethically. But I'm telling you, you're going to make money. You're going to make money if you invest in these things, because what's coming and what's expected by these CEOs and these leaders in the next, again, they're saying 24 months, but certainly within the next year, they believe it's going to transform society. Now, is it going to? They've been pretty bad about predictions, but we're already seeing, AI begin to actually resemble things that they've been talked about. So who knows where this is all going to go. But ultimately, I think is going to make people dumber. One of the things that is kind of hinted at in this conversation, and I did a whole stream on what I call technological atrophy, and how technology is a give and take. Everything we do is a give and take. And right. So Socrates was worried when Plato was writing everything down. Socrates says, look, you writing everything down, you're going to lose your memory. And what happened? Well, that was actually the case. Now, does that mean writing was a bad technology? No. Absolutely not. We wouldn't have scripture. We wouldn't have the Bible. We wouldn't have, again, God's providence unfolded through the technology of writing and the written script. But everything comes with a give and take. And so now people can't, I read an article about high schools and middle schools are moving to analog clocks or digital clocks, I'm sorry, because people can't read an analog clock anymore. The kids actually cannot look at a normal old school clock and tell what the time is. And so it's an atrophying of abilities. I read an article about map and how disoriented young people are because everywhere they go, they use like Apple Maps or Google Maps for, turn-by-turn instructions. And I remember when I started driving, you actually had to have a map. You actually, had to know the name of roads to get to different places. You had to know where was north. And now, like, young people, they have no idea. And so what my point is, technology is a give and take. And once we adopt a technology, there's also going to be an atrophying of something else. You don't get the whole thing. And that's why when we're talking about transhumanism, for me as an Orthodox perspective, like, that is going to be the total atrophying, the total destruction of the Imago Dei, because you're going to be dependent upon the technology to do everything. There is no agency, and for people that want to promote determinism, the only thing that will, the only environment in which determinism would be real is if everybody's hooked up to the AI, because the AI will make your decisions. And they were able to alter people's opinions and decision-making through neuroplants all the way back in the 50s and 60s. So they already knew that they could do all this stuff. We're in a different age now. And in 2025, this stuff is very dangerous. So anyways, let's check out this conversation. I'm going to skip through different points, but this is the beginning of it when they're talking about what is an AI agent. And I'm going to skip through to different sections that I found pretty important, but I hadn't actually seen the second half. This is a 2 hours and 32-minute conversation. I watched the first half and I thought it was pretty interesting. It was worth covering. But I may skip through and look at some of the stuff on the second half that I hadn't seen. But anyways, let's check this out.
You conjured water.
I conjured water from my mind.
Yeah.
And it's shown up here with us.
And it clearly thinks we need a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I assume most of the audience now are familiar with ChatGPT, right? You can go in and you can talk to an AI. It can search the web for you. It has a limited amount of tools. Maybe it can call a calculator to do some addition subtraction for you. But that's about it. It's a request response style. Agents are when you give it requests, and they can work indefinitely until they achieve a goal or they run into an error and they need your help. It's an AI bot that has access to tools. Those tools are access to a web browser like Operator, access to a programming environment, say like Replit, access to credit cards. The more tools you give the agent, the more powerful it is. Of course, there's all these considerations around security and safety and all of that stuff. But the most important thing is that AI agent will determine when it's finished executing. Today, AI agents can run for anywhere between 30 seconds to 30 minutes. There's a recent paper that came out that's showing that every 7 months, the number of minutes that the agent can run for is doubling. So we're at like 30 minutes now. In 7 months, we're going to be at an hour, then 2 hours. Pretty soon, we're going to be at days. And at that point, AI agent is doing labor, is doing kind of human-like labor. And actually, OpenAI's new model, O3, beat the expectation. So it sort of doubled coherence over long horizon tasks in just 3 or 4 months. So we're in this massive, and I mean, this exponential graph, that shows you the massive trend we're on.
Brett, give us a little bit of
Ginger Anton LaVey, Boomer Slayer. Hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. Thank you for that, Boomer Slayer. Always appreciate a good jab. Teresa throws in $10, says, love your show. Thank you so much, Teresa. I'm probably the only older Gen X female here. I need a chat to help me come up with a cool name. God bless. Well, hey, chat, you guys now have a mission. For anybody who's out there as a bot, you can be an AI agent for Teresa and give her a cool new online screen name, a new handle. Help our sister out. Thank you so much for the $10. Eric throws in $5, says, I tried buying some Alp using your code, but they have a shipping restriction to my state. I thought this was America. What? Well, that must be a problem with your state and its laws on nicotine. I'm not sure which state you are, but I would guess, Eric, it's a blue state. Can you confirm in the chat, say yay or nay, if your state is a blue state? So I do appreciate you helping me out. And that does remind me, if anybody's interested in the best nicotine pouches on the internet, do get some Alp. I'm now an official affiliate for Alp. I'm telling you, these two are the absolute best. And you don't have to do 9. I do 9 millis, but these two flavors, chilled mint and mountain wintergreen, phenomenal. Use this code right here and you will be able to help me out and get some Alps, man. Get your nicotine in. This is not tobacco. This does not have a bunch of cancerous stuff. This is just nicotine salts. So, and if you're not doing nicotine, I'm not telling anybody to start. Okay. I just personally like it. And it does have great. I was actually thinking about doing a stream just on nicotine because I've talked with so many people, even in Orthodoxy, they're like, oh, you do nicotine. Oh, they talk about addiction and how, it could be negative. I'm like, have you done any research on Alzheimer's and the nootropics of nicotine and how it binds to neural receptors? It's actually very healthy. And it's really good for men and it helps boost your testosterone. So do get yourself some Alp nicotine pouches. Again, I'll share that link right here in the chat and I greatly appreciate that. So I do the Zone 9 millis. Okay, nice. Well, check out the Alps if you haven't. I'm telling you, I think Alps are probably the best quality I've come across. And if you're not into nicotine, don't do it. But if you are, they're the best nicotine pouches. And a lot of good health qualities with nicotine. Oh, and I have another interesting thing to say today. So obviously we're diving into this and we're talking about Palantir. Guys, guess what? Before I even went live today, normally I stream on like Facebook, the 2 YouTube channels, Twitch and X. My Facebook video got deleted by Facebook before I even went live. At least that's what StreamYard told me before I went live. They said Facebook deleted it. If I wanted to stream to Facebook, I needed to create a new stream. And I could only think, geez, what in my show or my title would Facebook ban before I even did the stream? And I thought Palantir control, right? I mean, what's the title? Emergency meeting, Palantir control AI agents, the end of the internet. How is any of that threatening to Facebook? The only thing I could think is because we know Facebook uses Palantir, is that because Palantir control is in the title of the stream, Facebook deleted it. I was like, what? It's also nuts. Yeah. Oy vey. Okay, so here's Brett Weinstein's getting ready to talk a little bit about his thoughts on AI, and he contradicts himself. He'll talk about how AI is not an animal, and then he talks about how AI is a biological creature. Biological, dude, you what? How is it watch? You'll see. He references it as like being a type of biological creature. What? No, I mean you could say it's a creation, or if you want to, I mean, venture and create creature, but creature kind of insinuates some type of autonomy, will. But anyways, here Brett Weinstein's going to get into his stuff.
Your background, but also I saw you writing some notes there. There was a couple of words used there that I thought were quite interesting, especially considering what I know about you. The word God was used a few times.
Well, let me just say I'm an evolutionary biologist, and probably for the purposes of this conversation, it would be best to think of me as a complex systems theorist. One of the things that I believe is true about AI is that this is the first time that we have built machines that have crossed the threshold from the highly complicated into the truly complex. And I will say I'm listening to this conversation with a mixture of profound hope and dread, because it seems to me that it is obvious that the potential good that can come from this technology is effectively infinite. But I would say that the harm is probably 10 times. It's a bigger infinity. And the question of how we are going to get to a place where we can leverage the obvious power that is here to do good and dodge the worst harms, I have no idea. I know we're not prepared. So I hear you talking about agents, and I think that's marvelous. We can all use such a thing right away, and the more powerful it is, the better. The idea of something that can solve problems on your behalf while you're doing something else is marvelous. But of course, that is the precondition for absolute devastation to arise out of a miscommunication, right? To have something acting autonomously to accomplish a goal, you damn well better understand what the goal really is and how to pull back the reins in the event that it starts accomplishing something that wasn't the goal.
And so here's something that I hadn't heard people talk about. So as you guys know, my dissertation's on transhumanism and orthodoxy and all this stuff. But in chapter 1, I'm highlighting what's called, or what I call, techno-millenarianism, this expectation that technology from the 800s forward was going to bring us back to the Garden of Eden, that everything that we lost, everything that Adam and Eve lost through the fall, technology was restoring. This was I wouldn't say ancient, but certainly a medieval belief that is the precursor to eventually transhumanism. My point is regarding the curse of Adam. So for some of these Christians and these people that adopted this techno-millenarian, utopian, techno-utopian idea of history, is they believed that the curse that God placed on Adam and Eve was for women, childbearing and the pain that comes from that, and for men, labor. So after the fall, until Christ comes, we as the human condition must be bound to these conditions, that women go through the birth pangs and men must work. Well, what is technology? What is transhumanism? What is AI trying to do? Well, as I talked about before in previous streams in regard to the field called post-genderism, which is a subfield of post-humanism and a subfield of transhumanism. Post-genderism is arguing that what we see as the trans mania right now, that they're projecting it to, and again, these are people who are for it. They think it's going to excel. They think that eventually you or I will be able to choose whether we want to be a birthing mother or we want to be the penetrating father, and that all children are going to be born by synthetic means, and that sex between individuals is purely just for pleasure. And so what do we see with that? Well, technology is doing away with the birth pangs, right? Because they're promising that, oh, well, you can choose whether you want to be the mother or the father, and then we're gonna grow it like like some type of science experiment inside of some type of medical structure that allows the embryo to grow into a fetus, to grow into a small baby, and then you can just pick it up, like something you bought from Kohl's or something. And then with labor, that's what the UBI is. So literally the socialists of the 19th century, the 1800s, were talking specifically like this. They thought, again, the transcendence of the curses of Adam and Eve were the promises of technology, and they framed it in a Christian perspective. However, from a traditional Christian perspective, if everybody is on UBI, and men and women, but men specifically, do not work, do not have a drive to work, do not have any sort of outlet for their own expression or the production of something, that this is a stunting of that which actually allows for salvation, right? It's the reason why God gave women birth pangs is because birthing is a beautiful, unique capacity to women, and that you aren't a full, obviously women have different problems. Not all women have children, but certainly the ideal, the archetype of the full maturation of a woman is to become a mother. And the full maturation of a man is to become a provider. And this is kind of the context in which God has situated us. And so what's going to happen is that women are no longer mothers and men are no longer providers. The government does both. The government is your androgyne God.
Potential for abuse is also utterly profound. You can imagine, just pick your dark mirror fantasy dystopia where something has been told to hunt you down until you're dead, and it sees that as a technical challenge. So I don't know quite how to balance a discussion about all of the things that can clearly come from this that are utterly transcendent. I do think it is not inappropriate to be invoking God or biblical metaphors here. You're producing water seemingly from thin air. I believe that does have an exact biblical parallel. So any case, the power is here, but so too is the need for cautionary tales, which we don't have. That's the problem, is that there's no body of myth that will warn us properly of this tool, because we've just crossed a threshold that is similar.
Yeah, we do. It's called the Tower of Babel. It's called men trying to attain salvation and divinity outside the context of God. And that's exactly what's happening. And that's exactly what the AI is. And that's why the people that are closest to its development view it as a sort of the emergence of God himself and the emergence of a potential utopia. So yeah, we do have actually a foundational mythos within Western civilization, if we return back to Christianity, that actually tells us what happens when people go on these endeavors. That, yeah, for a while they may be able to build it, but eventually it's going to be scattered, and eventually it's going to cause chaos, and eventually it's going to lead to death. And that's a foundational myth of our civilization. So Eric, I get your point, because obviously the Tower of Babel and the construction of man entering into heaven through the erection of some type of tall structure symbolic of the sky, that's a little bit different than like the actual nitty gritty capacities of AI and AGI, but it's essentially the same thing. The tower is the sort of intellectual tower and the spiritual and philosophical underpinnings of where they think AI is taking them. That is, they are Babel. They are Babylon. And that's why everything that's tied with it from a Christian perspective is Babylon. LGBTQ, socialism, like everything that we would stand in opposition to, the destruction of the nuclear family, the destruction of marriage, the destruction of nation states, the annihilation of people groups through mass immigration. Orthodoxy is not for this, right? A traditional Orthodox perspective is that each unique group of people should have their own identity, and that should be preserved. That the uniqueness. I don't want to live in a world where Japan doesn't exist. But where we're moving, notice how the technocracy, the globalism, is everything in opposition to us. And it really is building a new Babylon. That's what it's doing.
In its capacity to alter the world as the invention of writing. I really think that's where we are. We're talking about something that is going to fundamentally alter what humans are with no plan. Writing alters the world slowly because the number of people who can do it is tiny at first and remains so for thousands of years. This is changing things weekly. And that's an awful lot of power to just simply have dumped on a system that wasn't well regulated to begin with.
Dan.
Yeah, so I'm an entrepreneur. I've been building businesses for the last 20 plus years. I'm completely well positioned between the two of you here. The excitement of the opportunity and the terror of what
We're skipping forward.
I applaud your optimism, and I like the way you think about these puzzles, but I think I see you making a mistake that we are about to discover.
And to give Brett credit, one of the things I appreciate about this conversation is he did temper some of the exuberant expectations by other people on the panel. Some of them are very optimistic, like and that's one of the problems is they tend to be so naive that they recognize the potential downfalls, but they're so sure. Oh no, we're not going to let that happen. We're going to make sure that everything goes in the right direction. And so, even though I have some fundamental disagreements with Brett and his worldview and some of his takes, but I do appreciate that he's in my opinion, one of the voice of reasons on this panel, like kind of tempering the expectations and like where all this stuff is going.
So we have several different categories of systems. We have simple systems, we have complicated systems, we have complex systems, and then we have complex adaptive systems. Mm-hmm. And to most of us, a highly complicated system appears like a complex system. We don't understand the distinction. Technologists often master highly complicated systems, and they know, for example, a computer is a perfectly predictable system inside there. It's deterministic. Mm-hmm. But to most of us, it functions, it is mysterious enough that it feels like a complex system. And if you're in the position of having mastered highly complicated systems, and you look at complex systems and you think it's a natural extension, you fail to anticipate just how unpredictable they are. So even if it is true that today there are limits to what these machines can do based on their training data, I think the problem is to see what's going to happen, you really want to start thinking of this as the evolution of a new species that will continue to evolve. It will partially be shaped by what we ask it to do, the direction we lead it, and it will partially be shaped by things we don't understand. So how does this computer that we have work? Well, one of the things that it does is we plug them into each other. Using language, it's almost as if you plug an Ethernet cable in between human minds, and that means that the cognitive potential exceeds the sum of the individual minds in question. Mm-hmm. Your AIs are going to do that, and that means that our ability to say what they are capable of does not come down to, well, we didn't train it on that data. As they begin to interact, that feedback is going to take them to capabilities we don't anticipate and may not even recognize once they become present. That's one of my fears. This is an evolving creature, and it's not even an animal. If it were an animal, you could say something about what the limits of that capability are. But this is a new type of biological creature, and it will become capable of things that we don't even have names for.
Mm-hmm. Even if it didn't do that, even if it just stayed within the boundaries that you're talking about, you mentioned about it having median level intelligence. Well, that by definition means 50% of the people on the planet are less intelligent than AI. To a degree, it's almost as if we've just invented a new continent of remote workers. Mm-hmm. There's billions of them. They've all got a master's or a PhD. They all speak all the languages. Anything that you could call someone or ask someone over the internet to do, they're there 24/7 and they're 25 cents an hour, if that. So if that really happened, like if we really did just discover that there were a billion extra people on the planet who all had PhDs and were happy to work for almost free, that would have a massive disruptive impact on society. Like society would have to rethink how everyone lives and works and gets meaning. And that's if it just stays at a median level of intelligence. Like it's pretty profound.
I still think it's a tool. This is power that is there to be harnessed by entrepreneurs. I think that the world.
Yeah, it's just a tool to be harnessed by entrepreneurs. You really, bro, you think it's only going to be used by entrepreneurs to make sure that their content is being spread across all the social media platforms, and that they're scripting, their sales pitch just right, that it gets maximum click? No, man. No, dude, this is being in whatever version we have available as the public is certainly not the version that the elites have. And we already can tell what the agenda of the elites is. And it's certainly not the well-being for individuals to be able to build businesses. I mean, it's like the criticism just previously was how many people are going to be out of business. And he's like, well, they just need to use AI to build their own business. It's like, which industries are going to be safe? And that's really that's a serious question that we were actually bouncing around in the last think tank meeting. Is like, what industries, with everything that's going on, let's just fast forward. Let's just grant their argument. These transhumanists and these AI optimists, let's just grant their argument and say wherever they think it's going to go in 5 years, that it goes. Like, what industry is not totally affected or annihilated by AI? And we were saying that I think what's going to happen, and it may already be beginning, but I think what's going to happen is a return to analog. Is that, as let's say this happens with the semi-truck drivers, and let's just say half of all semi-truck drivers in the United States lose their job to automation, and that AI begins driving semi-trucks around the country. They're going to have a deep-seated animosity towards where society's going in the technology. And then let's say the opposite end, that all the coders get let go because we don't need you to code because the AI can just code 24/7 and it does a better job than you anyways. Then they don't have a job. And it's like, I think what will eventually happen, especially with this automation process and what they're predicting in this conversation, that all these people are going to lose their job, is that there's going to be a groundswell of people that say, screw this, screw the AI. And there's going to be a higher value for human-made art, human-made film, human-produced photos, human-produced poetry, like things that are authentically human, I think are actually going to gain value. Because, I mean, for example, I have a friend in the film industry, works in Hollywood. And one of the things he's been talking about in our think tank meetings is VO, Google VO3, and its ability to produce video. And it has made certainly a leap from the previous video generators. And Midjourney is supposed to take another leap. And so all this stuff is supposed to get better and better and better. And yes, it does offer you and I to potentially create a 30-minute film that is actually of worth, and maybe it has meaning and it's all AI driven. But one of the things he was mentioning, like in the film industry, is a lot of the cameramen and a lot of the people that produce or like film movies, like we're talking about the crew, the cameramen, they're worried about AI. And they still do everything analog. Most of it is analog when they film movies and stuff. So there's still a skill set. And that's where we were saying is, like, eventually, like, all this AI stuff is going to run its course. Like, not people are going to be tired of AI content. Some of you guys may have seen the viral videos going around last week of like people using VO3 to generate like the story of Daniel in the lion's den or Moses parting the Red Sea. And was it interesting? Yes, it was interesting. It was, kind of cool, but eventually that stuff's going to get old. It's going to get, the AI can do all of it. No, there's not going to be an appeal there. There's not going to be a demand for AI generated content and AI generated items, generally speaking. So I think eventually there's going to be a groundswell that moves in opposition to it. And maybe it differentiates or delineates two segments of society, those that are all about the AI and the technocracy and where it's going to go, and people just like Chris Langdon, as I mentioned earlier, the man with the highest IQ. Maybe others are going to want to regress America back to something similar to the 1970s, something that's much more manageable, something that is much more communal, something that's much more human, which was his point, is that we have to move back to something more human. And so who knows where this is going to go. And we were speculating in the think tank, like, imagine the United States and a city like LA being a total technocratic hub. Everything is AI regulated. Everything is on the grid. Everything is monitored. And then imagine other parts of the country, say a small town in Montana or South Dakota, where we're essentially Luddite people who are aware of what's going. Maybe they got displaced through automation. They lost their job or their career, and they moved to these small towns. And then intentionally, the small towns do everything manually. Like, imagine a scenario, and I'm not saying this is going to happen. We were just playing this out in the think tank, but imagine, and not necessarily Amish per se. I'm not saying, it may be Amish-like in the sense of, how can we form towns and cities that are entirely oriented for the purpose of making the most humane place for people to live? So instead of automating a job that might be efficient for the city, these cities actually make it explicit. No, we want somebody to work that job, and we will then pay. And maybe it's not a huge wage, but we build cities and towns around America where they're like sort of refuges, where people can still maintain skills, where they're trying to not be totally dependent on technology. Who knows where it's going to go? But we were kind of speculating about that. But in general, to conclude what I was saying, I think AI generated content and information eventually is going to wear itself out, and people are going to prefer somebody with a human skill. And so when we're saying, like, what is the one thing that the AI won't be able to take away, it's not going to be able to take away people that have real skills. So what is your skill? If you have a real skill, and maybe AI is, say you're a photographer or you're a filmmaker and you do camera work, and maybe AI is going to be used and it's going to displace a lot of people from that business. But if you have that skill, make things that are authentically human, and there's going to be a demand for that. And I think that is really the only saving grace in the future, is like, you have to have a skill. You have to have a unique skill, and you almost have to be a professional at that skill. Because if you're below average or you're not in the top tier or whatever skill it is, well, then the AI probably can do it way better. And even in a Luddite town where everybody's working, they prefer the guy that has the better skills. And so it just feels like this is where we're going. It's going to be a very, very precarious situation.
The world is going to get disrupted, right? This post-war world that we created, where you go through life, you go through 12 years of education, you get to college, and you just check the boxes, you get a job. We can already see the fractures of that. It is, this American dream is perhaps no longer there. And so I think the world has already changed. And so, but like, what are the opportunities? Obviously, there are downsides. The opportunities is, for the first time, access to opportunity is equal. And I do think there's going to be more inequality. And the reason for this inequality is because, actually, Steve Jobs made this analogy. It's like the best taxi driver in New York is like 20% better than the average taxi driver. The best programmer can be 10x better. We say the 10x engineer. Now the variance will be in the 1000x, right? Like the best entrepreneur that can leverage those agents could be better. It could be 1,000 times better than someone who doesn't have the grit, doesn't have the skill, doesn't have the ambition, right? So that will create a world. Yes, there's massive access to opportunity, but there are people who will
seize it, and then then there'll be people who don't. I imagine it almost like a marathon race. And AI has two superpowers. One superpower is to distract people, such as TikTok algorithm.
That's right.
And the other superpower is to make you hyper creative. So you become a hyper consumer or a hyper creator. And in this marathon race, the vast majority of people have got their shoes tied together because AI is distracting them. Some people are running traditional race. Some people have got a bicycle, and some people have got a Formula One vehicle. And it's going to be very confronting when the results go on the scoreboard and you say, oh, wait a second, there's a few people who finished this marathon in about 30 minutes. And there's a lot of us who finished in like 18 hours because we had our shoes tied together. And I can't understand, if we've got equal opportunity, why there's so much disparity between how fast I'm using an analogy, but this idea that, someone, like, a lot of people are going to start earning $1 million a month. And a lot of people are going to say, hey, I can't even get a job for $15 an hour. There's going to be this kind of interesting
And we're already seeing this. I mean, we're already seeing this. Like, again, I'm a streamer. I consider myself more on an online educator. But you look at the people like Neon and Aiden Ross, these people that offer very little value and make millions and millions of dollars. Now, obviously, it's not totally oriented around AI or anything, but I'm just highlighting a general trend that we're seeing in the economy is like the average person, it's becoming more difficult for them to find a well-paying job. Meanwhile, people that do use AI, I mean, in various ways. There was an article about a guy that created an OnlyFans account using an AI woman, and it was making millions of dollars. But my point being is that I could totally see how AI is going to accelerate and catalyze this differentiation between people. And we're already seeing it, like I make $100,000 a day through my online business and my courses. And then, half the stuff is AI generated. It's not even great quality content. Maybe these people aren't even like exceptional individuals, and they make all this money. And then you have exceptional individuals that work regular jobs and they're struggling to keep up with everything.
But I hear in what both of you are saying, a kind of assumption that this will all be done on the up and up. And I do want to I'm not a doomer. I agree that the doomers are likely incorrect, that their fears are misplaced. But I do think we have a question of a related rates problem. I said the potential for good here is infinite and the potential for bad is 10 times, right? What I mean is, there are lots of ways in which this obviously empowers people to do things that they were going to be otherwise stuck in the mundane process of learning to code and then figuring out how to make the code work and bring it to market and all of that. And this solves a lot of those problems. And that's obviously a good thing. Really, what we should want is the wealth creation object as quickly as we can get there. But the problem is, as much as that hyper creative individual is empowered to make wealth, the person who is interested in stealing may be even more empowered. And I'm concerned about that at a pretty high level. The abuse cases may outnumber the use cases, and we don't have a plan for what to do about that.
Can I give you a quick introduction here, like the optimistic view? OpenAI invented the first version GPT came out in 2019. 2020 was GPT-2. And so OpenAI, now they get a lot of criticism and lawsuit from Elon Musk that they're no longer open source, right? They used to be. The reason is in GPT-2, they said we are no longer going to open source this technology because it's going to create opportunities for abuse, such as influencing elections, stealing grandma's credit card, and so on and so forth. Wouldn't you say, Brett, that it is kind of surprising how little abuse we've seen so far?
I don't know how much abuse we've seen so far. I don't know how any of us do. And I also, even the example that you suggest, where ChatGPT is no longer open source to prevent it.
I mean, again, what of a kind of a dumb question. Aren't you amazed by how little abuse we've seen with where AI is? Little abuse. Again, like, how do you measure that? Are people being scammed right now through AI? I got people just through my website. I'm a nobody, and people are using AI bot accounts to flood me with like emails, and it's clearly AI generated. It's clearly just some type of bot farm. You don't think old people are losing their life savings because they're being convinced by scammers through AI, through, again, text messages, emails, all type. Absolutely. Like, what do you mean surprised by the little bit of corruption through AI? What are you talking about? How do you, again, like to Brett's point, how do you even measure that? What are you talking about?
Abuse. I'm taking their word for it that that's the motivation. Where as a systems theorist, I would say, well, if you had a technology that was excellent at enhancing your capacity to wield power, then open sourcing it is a failure to capitalize on that, and that the most remunerative use is to keep it private and then either sell the ability to manipulate elections to people who want to do so, or sell the ability to have it kept off the table for people who don't. And I would expect that that's probably what's going on. If you have a technology as transformative as this, giving it away for free is counterintuitive, which leaves those of us in the public more or less at the mercy of the people who have it. So I don't see the reason for comfort. We are at the dawn of this radical transformation of humans that, by its very nature as a truly complex and emergent innovation, nobody on Earth can predict what's going to happen. We're on the event horizon of something. And the problem is, we can talk about the obvious disruptions, the job disruption, and that's going to be massive. And does that lead some group of elites to decide, oh, well, suddenly we have a lot of useless eaters, and what are we going to do about that? Because that conversation tends to lead somewhere very dark very quickly. But I think that's just the beginning of the various ways in which this could go wrong without the doomer scenarios coming into play. This is an uncontrolled experiment in which all of humanity is downstream.
Yeah, so I was trying to make the point that OpenAI has been sort of wrong about the sort of how big of a potential for harm it is. Like, I think we would have heard about it in the news, like the sort of how much harm it's done. And maybe, some of it.
What a naive opinion. Well, I'm sure CNN would have told me if there was some serious threats to the potentials of AI being abused. I mean, MSNBC would have certainly run a story about it. We're not singing to the main. Shh up, dude. The people who are in favor of the technocratic control and the development of this stuff own those media systems. What are you talking about, dude?
But it's working in the shadows. But like the few incidents that we've heard about where, the cause of LLMs, large language models, the technology that's powering ChatGPT, has been huge headliners on like New York Times talked about this kid that was, perhaps goaded by some kind of chat software that, helps teenagers to be less lonely into suicide, which is tragic. And obviously these are the kind of safety and abuse issues that we want to worry about. But these are kind of these isolated incidents. And we do have open source large language models. Obviously, the thing that everyone talks about is DeepSeek. DeepSeek is coming from China. So what is DeepSeek's incentive? But perhaps the incentive is to destroy the AI industry in the US. Oh,
yeah, I have it on 1.25. Are you guys asking why they're speaking fast? It's because we're trying to get, I've already been streaming for 2 hours, so I'm just trying to get through as much of it. So yeah, if anybody's watching, the audio is on 1.25 of this video.
When they released DeepSeek, the market tanked. The market for NVIDIA, the market for AI, and all of that. But there is an incentive to open source. Meta is open sourcing Llama. Llama is another AI similar to ChatGPT. The reason they're open sourcing Llama, and Zuckerberg just says that out loud, is basically they don't want to be beholden to OpenAI. They don't sell AI as a service. They use it to build products. And there's this concept in business called commoditize your complement. Because you need AI as technology to run your service, the best strategy to do is to open source it. So these market forces are going to create conditions that I think are actually beneficial. So I'll give you a few examples. One is, first of all, the AI companies are motivated to create AI that is safe so that they can sell it. Second, there are security companies investing in AIs that allows them to protect from the sort of malicious acting of AI. And so you have the free market. We've always had that, but generally as humanity, we've been able to leverage the same technology to protect against the abuse.
So I don't really understand this, and maybe this is the exact discussion that you would expect between somebody at the frontier of the highly complicated, staring at a complex system, and a biologist who comes from the land of the complex and is looking back at highly complicated systems. In game theory, we have something called a collective action problem. Mm-hmm. And in the market that you're describing, an individual company has no capacity to hold back the abuses of AI. The most you can do is not participate in them. You can't stop other people from programming LLMs in some dangerous way. And you can limit your own ability to earn based on your own limitations of what you're willing to do. And then effectively what happens is the technology gets invented anyway, it's just that the dollars end up in somebody else's pocket. So the incentive is not to restrain yourself so that you can at least compete and participate in the market that's going to be opened. And so the number of ways in which you can abuse this technology, let's take a couple. What is to stop somebody from training LLMs on an individual's creative output and then creating an LLM that can outcompete that individual, can effectively not only produce what they would naturally produce over the course of a lifetime, but can extrapolate from it and can even hybridize it with the insights of other people, so that effectively those who have the LLM can train it on the creativity of others, not cut them in on the use of that insight. You can effectively end up putting yourself out of business by putting your creative ideas in the world where they get sucked up as training data for future LLMs. That is unscrupulous, but it's effectively guaranteed. In fact, it's already happened. So that's a problem. And likewise, what would stop somebody from interacting with an individual and training an LLM to become like a personalized con artist, something that would play exactly to your blind spots?
That does happen. That is starting to happen. People get phone calls and it sounds like their daughter, and I've lost my phone and I'm borrowing a friend's phone and all of that sort of stuff. What's interesting is that I think you make a really good point. I worry about the impact on society, and yet when I look at every single individual who uses AI regularly, it almost has nothing but profoundly positive impact on their life.
What? That is so contrary to what people are finding regarding attention spans and literacy rates. So because people can just get information through the AI so quickly, one, they're not actually reading, they're not actually doing like deep learning. They're just regurgitating, finding, having the AI do it all for them, and then they just kind of regurgitate the information. So they're not learning. And we know for a fact through the implementation of AI and the algorithm through social media that people's attention spans are the worst that they've ever been. And the lack of an attention span is a form of neoteny. It's a form of immaturity, because you then are going to be more primitive in the sense that pleasure and sensual pleasure is going to direct your motivation and your intentions more thoroughly, because you don't have the ability to take yourself out of the immediate context of how you feel and what you think, because you're so programmed for this short attention span. And so we're already seeing this in culture. We're already, it's so funny they're saying this, and for the third year in a row, we're seeing literacy rates and IQ levels drop for the first time in history. So how do you explain that? How do you tell me that there's no benefits? Everybody I've interacted with who uses AI seems to be profoundly benefited from it. Now, yeah, there's a lot of benefits. Obviously, everybody talks about the benefits, but we're literally seeing people regress cognitively in relationship to the social media, through AI, and through like the immediate gratification of the internet that technology provides. So no, if the goal is to becoming more human, it's doing the exact opposite.
I look at people like I was just spending some time with my parents-in-law who are in their 70s and early 80s, and they use AI regularly for all sorts of things that they find incredibly valuable and that improves the quality of their life. I personally did an M&A, a mergers and acquisitions deal, where I bought a company last year, and the AI was so powerful at helping that process. The conversations were transcribed and they were turned into letters of intent and then press releases and legal documents. And we probably shaved $100,000 worth of costs, and we sped up the whole process. And it was pretty magical to see how it could happen. With that said, you know, there's all of these, like, well, $100,000 worth of lawyers didn't get paid, right? So,
well, what I want to know,
okay.
yeah,
there's a lot of people upset about that.
But if we look back at the invention of the cell phone or the invention of the social media platforms, there would be every reason to have exactly the same perspective, right? I remember the beginning of Facebook, and I remember the idea that suddenly the process that used to afflict people, where you would just lose touch with most of the people who had been important to you, that was not something that needed to happen.
Yeah, Dr. Emmy says, seems like dead internet theory is coming back. Well, that's a real threat. And that's what I brought up with the article about the AI crawlers and closing essentially the open space of the internet. But then obviously the AI augmentation and you know, that's what the whole, as I just already mentioned in the opening statement, opening monologue, is Mission Impossible and the entity. The whole premise of the last two Mission Impossibles is premised on the idea that the AI becomes rogue or is potentially controlled by outside entities, and that it is augmenting all information on the internet because it has access to it. And if that happens, like, literally the internet is dead because the AI has changed and altered anything. I mean, there is no, even when you try to text somebody, the AI could augment the text message after you've already sent it. You know, everything is manipulable, everything is controllable. And that essentially is the death. And maybe the golden lining, the shining light behind all this stuff is it forces people to communicate face to face. It forces, because if you authentically want to know and you're afraid that maybe the AI will alter any message or words or censor something because they had wrong speech, the only way to get around that is face to face. And of course, then Palantir is going to be tracking you and they're going to know exactly where you're at.
Or you could just retain them permanently as a part of a diffuse social grouping that just simply grew and value was added. There's no end to how much good that did. But what it did to us was profound and not evident in the first chapter. Say the same thing about the cell phones and the dopamine traps and the way this has disconnected us from each other, the way it has disconnected us from nature, the way it has altered the very patterns with which we think. It has altered every classroom. So, and those things I think are going to turn out to have been sort of minor foreshadowings of the disruption that AI will produce. So I agree with you. Today, the amount you can do with AI is a tremendous amount of good. There's a little bit of harm. Maybe that's something we need to worry about. But as this develops, as we get to, you know, to peer over the edge of this cliff that we're headed to, I think we're going to discover that we can't yet detect the nature of the alteration that's coming.
I just wanted to add some context to that, because I'm just...
And you know, Brett's right in that sense that the threats increase as it gets stronger. Not the other way. It's not more likely to save humanity as it builds itself and becomes more powerful. It's the exact opposite. Major shout out to the Brad for becoming a COTEL crew members. Thank you so much, Brad. God bless you. Abject Fool throws in two, says, Dr. DPH, how does Bitcoin play into all this? Well, Bitcoin, you know, in my opinion, the system that is, even though, like, I'm in the state of Indiana, I think Indiana, Tennessee, and Texas, and maybe there's a couple other states, but they've already banned CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. Again, Whitney Webb, in the clip that we watched, she argues that Wall Street wouldn't even want the Fed to have a CBDC. Potentially so, although there was talks of it 2 years ago that the Federal Reserve is supposed to roll out a CBDC this year. And according to Trump, he's not in favor of that. I know a handful of states, as I said, have already banned it within their state limits. But in the big, beautiful bill, I don't know if you guys saw, but one of the things in there, it prevents states from regulating AI for 10 years. Now, again, if you can't see Palantir and the tech oligarchs infiltrating the Trump administration, just think about that. If you're a state, you are not allowed to regulate or make any sort of autonomous decision on AI for the next decade, and listen to where these people think that's going. So you have no say in the matter. I mean, what kind of amendment is that in the bill? That needs to be scrapped immediately. Like, if we're a federalist system, then we should have states that maybe totally ban AI. I doubt anybody would, but maybe we have a few that would, and we can then run the experiment, right? We can run the experiment and see how that state holds up against another state that's totally AI. But no, they want everybody has to submit. Everybody has to bow the knee to the AI. So how does Bitcoin play into this? Well, I mean, I think that it's moving towards a digital world. That's the world they're creating, and Bitcoin is just gold in that digital world. I hold Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin is a good move long term. I mean, I've invested in Bitcoin as opposed to Palantir and Nvidia and all these other corporations personally. And maybe that's a bad move. Maybe I would have made more money if I invested in the stocks of these tech companies. But I don't see, me personally as an Orthodox Christian, I don't see there's anything ethically wrong with holding Bitcoin, even though it is obviously a digital currency, because that's already where it's going. At least I can hold my value there. And that's what I look at Bitcoin is. Bitcoin is a reserve for value that will continually grow into the future. It's very dynamic. It fluctuates very often, but I look at it as just a way to hedge your bets on where we're going. But I don't know. We'll see. Glitchy Rhythm throws in too, says "Stray from the Path" for Teresa's name. Thanks, DPH. Well, there you go, Teresa. There's an option. It looks like we have another one too. Screwed Up Nevsky throws in $20. Screwed Up Nevsky, thank you so much, bro, for the support today. Really appreciate that. Thank you, brother. And then Nathan Slippery gives Teresa another option. He says, name for Teresa, Orthodox Gen X Mama, tribute to Orthodox Boomer Grandma. So there you go. There's number 2 option, Teresa. Bitter Klinger throws in 10, says, I'll join you, Nevsky. I've been missing streams lately, and this channel is well worth supporting. Well, thank you so much, Bitter Klinger. Really appreciate that, and hope today's stream is insightful in some way in regards to just kind of bringing people up to speed on where we're at regarding all the technology and AI. Boomer Slayer, thank you so much for becoming a COTEL Crew member. God bless you. And Death Culture throws in 5, says, you think because of AI is a good reason to pursue trades and job security? Joyous feast. Yeah, no, I think having an actual skill is really, really important. And so, for example, academia. So like what is, I'll just use myself as the example. What does the future look like in regards to education? Is the university model dead? I suspect it is. And we're already seeing people like Jordan Peterson have the Peterson Academy. And me and the Eschaton Vigil were looking at what the accreditation process is in the United States. And honestly, it's not that difficult. And so I envision, and it's already starting right now, but in the future, is that more and more students, say you go to, I'm here in Indiana. You say you go to Indiana University, IU, and you're an undergraduate student. And say I have on my website 3, 4, 5 academic courses that I can teach, and that you can enroll in them through my website. And you essentially do an online course, and I'm your professor for that course. You can get all that accredited, and that student can take those credits and use it towards their biology degree, right? Maybe I have some stuff on orthodoxy or transhuman, whatever it may be. It doesn't matter. As long as I get it accredited through the accrediting process, people can purchase those courses and they can go towards their degree, and I don't have to offer a degree. I don't have to be part of the university per se. And so how do you make a career in the next 10 to 20 years of being an educator? I don't think it's the traditional historical model of going and becoming a tenured professor at a university. I think it's being very skilled at articulating ideas, liking to do research, and being able to present ideas from a unique perspective that people find interesting. That's the only thing that I can do that the AI can't do, right? ChatGPT, if you look up any of my streams, you can put in that topic, and ChatGPT can provide all the facts, or at least the stuff that it can get on the internet regarding that topic. Well, then what does that do for me? The only thing I can provide people is one, if I garner their trust and they trust me as an individual, they can know that I will go through information. I like to research. I can articulate it in a compelling and digestible way. And then I can bring it from a perspective that is unique, which is for me, an Orthodox Christian. I mean, are people going to get theological and spiritual advice from the AI? I'm sure some people are already doing that right now. But in the future, those are skill sets that I can harness, develop, and acquire that at least differentiates me from an AI, right? I think education is going to be really difficult with AI moving forward. So it's about personality, it's about skill, it's about ability. And that's true then with anything. I mean, I'm dealing with the same thing as somebody trying to be an educator and do all this stuff online. So I think if you really want some job security, the trades are a good move. I think having a skill set is a really good move, and it could be anything. I know people that are plumbers that began as an apprentice, then became a full-time plumber, and then eventually stepped away, built their own business, and now they got like 4, 5, 10 plumbers underneath them. They're making incredible money. And it's a great industry to be in regards to its utility and its necessity. So that's just plumbing. Any trade or skill, I see a revitalization of. And if we were to go to war, the United States were to go to war, we don't have an industrial base anymore. So we'd have to create one. Therefore, I think there would be high-paying jobs for people to be in, any type of manual labor. But the whole goal of this transhumanism stuff is that the AI robots, Tesla robotics, will be able to do a lot of the manual labor. And so that's how they're hedging their bets. So Trump's trying to reindustrialize the United States, right? Well, all the critics are saying, well, you guys don't have an educated workforce to even do the jobs. And then you have people like Musk and Thiel and all these tech oligarchs. They say, oh, don't worry about it. We'll just train the AI robots. They'll do all that stuff. They'll help build the tanks. They'll help build the machines. All the weapons. Don't worry. We don't need to educate the populace. That's like investing in something that's already dying. It's very anti-human. So take that for what it's worth, whatever you get from that. And I would say pursue a physical skill, any type of skill. I mean, take yourself back from, maybe the last 30, 40 years and find something that you love and then become great at that skill. Could be anything. Could be welding. I was mentioning that one of the tasks I saw one of the AI enthusiasts talk about is like underwater welding was something that they have yet to get an AI to be able to do because of the complexity, the movements, the ocean pushing you. You're underwater. You have to make the right weld. And now they expect the AI to be able to do that eventually. They expect the AI to be, these robotics to be able to do all physical labor, but I don't think it's going to be able to, personally. I think it's a failed promise. And I think the closer your skill set is to reality, the physical world that God created, the better you're going to be long term. If your total skill is coding, if your total skill is something digital, you're already lost. You cannot outcompete the AI in that. The only way you can outcompete the AI is to have a real skill in the real world. That's the only thing that I see personally. So I hope that answers your question, Death Culture. Red Fox throws in a generous 50. Red Fox, thank you so much for the support, brother. Thank you very much. He says, I'm writing a paper for the War College on how transitioning from a shared moral framework to a secular postmodern worldview has impacted the Army. There is an epistemic crisis with senior leaders unable to justify orders and policy. Yeah, I can totally see that. In my personal opinion too, I think that there's a split amongst, so let's just use the military, for example. Let's say those that are like MAGA supporting generals or officers. And then you have the more, the critical theorists, the people that are DEI hires. And the DEI hires are coming out of a sort of postmodern turn where you are sort of reduced to your phenotype. And therefore we have to have women and certain demographics, certain phenotypes has to fill positions. It doesn't matter about merit. It doesn't matter about who they are. You have that faction. And then you have like the Trump faction, which is the continuation of modernity. And modernity, as I've talked about, is like those 5 pillars. It's secularism, it's science, it's rationalism, it's democracy, and it's the belief that all of these things will lead in a linear progression towards utopia. And that is the modernist paradigm. Now, whether people are conscious of it or not doesn't matter. That is the post-Enlightenment world that we live in, and that is the riff, right? Between you look at the institutions, it's between like the postmodern relativists and it's the people that are still like, no, I'm a classical liberal. It's the Jordan Petersons of the world. No, I'm still a classical liberal. Like, it's the woke right that's undermining my modernism. And so I don't, take that for whatever it's worth, Red Fox. But I imagine this is true with every institution right now at a subconscious level. It's not like people are super conscious of intellectual history and paradigms of thought, but people like the tech oligarchs, like the Zionism is tied with modernity. That's the only time it's ever existed, right? So Zionism is a fixture of our modern period. The technocracy, which is tied with the science and the rationalism leading to ultimate knowledge, that is part of modernity. And so you can see how there's like a clash between those who are trying to like break free in this relativist postmodernism that just values you get to create your own truth. And then you have the modernists that, whether they're conscious of it or not, they're still tied with like democracy. Democracy will save the world. Really? Where's that been the case? Like, literally in history, where has that been the case with democracy? Like, I think it's becoming more and more prevalent that everything modernity has promised, it's failed. I mean, the modern world order post World War I and World War II, World War I's being the eradication of monarchy. World War II is the reshaping of the world that we live in now and essentially establishing the post-World War II consensus. I think that's what the threat of the woke right is. All the post-World War II consensus, the consensus of the modernist project is kind of shaky. So I don't know. That's kind of my own thoughts. And maybe you're seeing that, Red Fox. But yeah, in regards to the inability to justify orders and policy, at least the modernists have a goal. Now, maybe I, as an Orthodox Christian that has more of a pre-modern worldview, maybe I disagree with if that goal is possible, but at least they're oriented together in a direction. The problem with the postmodernists is they have no direction other than like destruction, like deconstructing the establishment or the institution, everything that already exists. They just want to deconstruct. That's the only thing that unifies these people. Because if you talk to them, they have a hodgepodge of beliefs and opinions about a wide variety of things. So anyways, thank you so much, Red Fox, for that generous support, brother. Really appreciate that. Let me skip forward here. There's a section on what will happen to humans. And then it says, which jobs will be replaced by AI? I thought that was a good little section. We'll start there.
Is what jobs, because I know that you have this perspective, what jobs are going to be made redundant in a world where I am sat here as a CEO with 1,000 AI agents.
Right.
I was thinking of all the names of the people in my company who are currently doing those jobs. I was thinking about my CFO when he talks about processing business data, my graphic designers, my video editors, etc. So what jobs are going to be impacted?
Yeah, all of those. So I think,
and what do they do?
Maybe this is useful for the audience. I think if your job is as routine as it comes, your job is gone in the next couple of years. So meaning if in those jobs, for example, quality assurance jobs, data entry jobs, you're sitting in front of a computer and you're supposed to click and type things in a certain order. Operator and those technologies are coming on the market really quickly, and those are going to displace a lot of labor. Accountants,
lawyers.
Yes.
I've just pulled a ligament in my foot, and they did an MRI scan, and I had to wait a couple of days for someone to look at the MRI scan and tell me what it meant.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that's gone.
Yeah, I think the healthcare ecosystem is hard to predict because of regulation. And again,
but that's the whole point. If you read the book Dataism, Homo Deus by Yuval Noah Harari, the prophet of the WEF, his whole thing is that there will be no privacy regarding your medical information. So he's saying, okay, right now we don't have it because of regulation, but look what AI could do. It could read all your medical. Yeah, and it can also know everything about you to be weaponized against you. It can know your genetic weak points, the things in which maybe gases or whatever it may be, developing the new coronavirus. What's the best way? How could we target these people with these phenotypes, with this genetic mark? And so what you're happy because the AI can read your x-ray? Like these are people again, notice all their arguments are about efficiency. It's not about a larger perspective of humanity. It's not a larger perspective of community. I mean, we're literally witnessing the breakdown of community due to the rise of technology, right? So one of the things they haven't talked about is the immense isolation people have, how Gen Zers have the least amount of friends ever recorded since it's been recorded. They spend the least amount of time with people outside their home. That's a problem. That's a huge problem. But hey, if the AI has access to all your medical records, it would be really efficient. You know, it would tell you what vitamins you could use.
So many limiting factors on how this technology can permeate the economy because of regulations and people's willingness to take it. But things, unregulated jobs that are purely text in, text out. If your job, you get a message and you produce some kind of artifact that's like probably text or images, that job is at risk.
So just to give you some stats here as well, about 50% of Americans who have a college degree currently use AI.
Mm-hmm.
The stats are significantly lower for Americans without a college degree. So you can see how a splinter might emerge there and that crack will widen because people like us at this table are all messing around with it. But my mum and dad in Plymouth in the southwest, rural England, haven't got, they just figured out iPhones. So I got them an iPhone and now they're texting me back. AI is a million miles away. And if I start running off with my AGI and my agents, that gap is going to widen. Women are disproportionately affected by automation, which is what you were talking about there, with about 80% of working women in an at-risk job compared to just over 50% of men, according to the Harvard Business Review. And jobs requiring only a high school diploma have an automation risk of 80%, while those requiring a bachelor's degree have an automation risk of just 20%. So we can see again how this will cause a sort of a...
It's also a huge risk with business process outsourcing, which is essentially Western countries sending jobs to India, to the Philippines. Like at the moment, millions of people have been lifted out of poverty through the ability to do those kind of business process outsourcing jobs, and those are all going to go.
But they're going to have 1,000 employees.
But also, these people are actually already transitioning to training AIs.
Mm-hmm.
So there's going to be a massive industry around training AIs.
Which is, again, it's so retarded. It's like learning to code. The whole point of the AI Manhattan Project race that is happening is that the AI will train itself. Like eventually, so yeah, why don't you just quit your job and learn how to train AI? And then in 5-10 years, according to these people who believe in the singularity and this exponential progress of artificial intelligence, you're going to be out of a job again. Like, what are you talking about? The AI is going to train itself.
They're trained.
Well, no, you have to continuously acquire new skills. And this is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
This is, again, if AI is a function of its data, then you need increasingly more data. And by the way, we ran out of internet data.
I was actually thinking, interestingly, that this might not be great for
look how exciting it is. We ran out of internet data. Yeah. Do you know what Yuval Noah Harari says? You are the data. You are the most important data. And he says, we want to know everything that's going on in your body and your mind. And we're going to know. And he says, the AI God will know it better than you do. And therefore, he or it knows you better than you do. You can get all your information about yourself from the AI. That's like explicitly written in Homo Deus. And that's exactly what these people are talking about. And that's one of the things that I worry about. Why I never got a, what is that bracelet that tracks like your heart? It's a huge fitness band. It doesn't have any face on it. It looks like it's just a strap goes on your wrist. But the reason why I haven't even got any of the health monitors is because all the wearables, no, not Fitbit. Fitbit has a screen. It's like, it's very popular right now. You see a lot of the influencers use it. It tracks everything, tracks your sleeping cycle. I don't know. Somebody in the chat will know it. I'm sure somebody will leave a comment because whenever I forget something, somebody remembers it. Yeah, Whoop. Thank you, Michael B. Michael B with the win. It's a Whoop. That's what I was thinking of, a Whoop. So I was looking at some of it. I thought the Whoop was the best one. Yep, C got it too. I thought Whoop was the best one. But the thing that I worry about is why do I want to put all my personal medical information on an app and then allow the AI to filter it and like speak to me? And I can, I just worry about that being accessed. And the reason why I feel that way is because of reading Homo Deus and him saying like, all the data of all the electronic wearables, we're going to get all that data. I mean, he literally says that in the book. So, I don't know. Yeah. I've seen Aura Ring. I mean, I think they're really beneficial. I would probably like to get one. And at the same time, I saw a guy who runs pharmacies. I think he was on Joe Rogan. And one of the things he's very red pilled on the medical procedures post COVID, if you know what I'm talking about. And so he was very aware of like the problems with big pharma and all this stuff. And he was talking about how he's buying small pharmacies and he's using AI to make it more efficient to get people things like ivermectin and that. So from that perspective, okay, like if we can get real medicine, but I don't know. I just feel uneasy giving my biomedical information to an app that I know is being tracked. I know, Palantir, you don't think Palantir has access to something? Now, does Whoop have connection? I have no idea. But if I got an Apple Watch, yeah, Palantir's tracking all, Apple, a Fitbit, like these major corporations, like that stuff's being sold. Like somebody who doesn't care about you has some of the most intimate information about you. So anyways, Chris Bakusin throws in 10, says, I'm constantly having to reiterate to my friends and family that technological innovation and progress are not synonymous. Yeah, that's a big one. Everything is marketing, everything. Keep up the great work, brother. Well, thank you so much, Chris. And that's a great point, right? So that would be like my argument if I was to debate somebody who was a progressive or somebody who really a modernist, right? Because if you're a modernist, you believe that society is continually progressing. And the point is like, how do you define progress? Has technology advanced? Absolutely. Technology is advancing every day. But if progress is based on the human condition and the human experience, it's not getting better. It's getting worse. What are you talking about? Like people are literally getting dumber. People are literally becoming more illiterate. Like people 200 years, like America in the early 1800s was more literate than America now. I was reading a thing on that in regards to what was it? Different tiers of reading. So like, I think it was tier 5, like the top tier of reading. More people were highly literate at the beginning of this country than they are now. That is not progress. And technology has been advancing that whole time. So which one is it? Is progress just technological advance? Or is progress actually the human soul in the individual, in the human community, which is clearly taking a hit? And it doesn't look like it's progressing. It looks like it's regressing. So, yeah, I totally agree with you, Chris. Thank you very much for the support. All right, let's continue.
The United States or the UK, the Western world, because it is going to be a leveler.
Yeah.
Where now a kid in India doesn't need a Silicon Valley office and $7 million in investment to throw up a software company, basically.
My belief is that, so I have a more broad definition of AGI and the singularity. And for me, AGI is, do we have artificial general intelligence in terms of, generally speaking, can AI just do stuff that humans used to be able to do? And we've already crossed that point. We have this general intelligence that we can now all access. And 800 million people a week are now using ChatGPT. It's exploded in the last 3 months. And then to me, a singularity, when the first tractor went out onto a farm, for me, that was a singularity moment because everyone who worked in farming, it used to take 100 people to plow a field. And now a tractor comes along and 2 guys with the tractor can now plow the field in just as much time. And now 98 people out of 100 are completely out of a job.
We also always underestimate a technology if it does go on to change history. When you look back through cars, horses, planes, the Wright brothers just thought of a plane as being something that the army could use. They had no idea of the application. So someone said to me recently, they said, when it does change the world, we underestimate the impact that it will change the world. And I see people now with their estimations of AI agents already incredibly optimistic. And so if history holds here, we are undershooting the impact it's going to have. And I think this is the first time in my life where the Industrial Revolution analogies seem to fall a little bit short.
Yeah.
Because we've never seen intelligence. That's like I could think of this as I'm not an intelligent. When you said agency is going to remain as an important thing, we're sat here talking about AI agents. And the crazy thing in a world of AI agents that have super intelligence is I can just tell my agent, listen, I'm going on holiday. Please build me a SaaS company that spots a market opportunity, throw up the website, post it on my social media channel. I'll be in Hawaii. And this new agentic world is stealing that too, because now it can take action. In the same way that I can browse the internet, I can call Domino's Pizza, speak to their agentic agent, organize my pizza to be there before I even wake up. And in fact, predictability, OpenAI now learns, and Sam Altman said that they've expanded the memory feature. So it knows it's knowing more and more and more and more about me. It'll almost be able to predict what I want when I want it. It'll know Steve's calendar, he's arriving at.
That's the whole point of a Palantir, right? Is that they're going to know somebody wants to commit a crime before they commit it. And that's how they're going to make a crimeless world. Yeah. And that's what I also mean about the atrophying, right? So if the AI agent is your main source of agency in the world, what happens to you as an individual? And what happens when this is done for a lifetime? Imagine for 10 years, you really don't do a whole lot of work. You just program your AI agent, and maybe you're making money and on paper you're successful. But you as a person, I mean, what skill do you have? What agent? How is that fulfilling? How is that meaningful? Doesn't seem like much. It seems like, again, an atrophying of the human will to willfully do things and have agency in the world, and you're going to lack the will to resist the thing that's coming.
Studio, make sure his cadence is on the side, make sure his iPad has the brief on it, do the brief, do the research for me, and everything else. So we'll remember Brett's birthday, so when I arrive, there'll be something. In fact, it's removing my need for any agency.
Yes, and again, I don't know how to make this point so that it occurs to people what I'm really suggesting.
First Person Q just gifted 5 COTEL Crew memberships. Thank you so much, First Person Q. God bless you, brother. Really appreciate that. And guys, if anybody out there is feeling generous, please give some COTEL Crew memberships. They can get access to exclusive videos on the YouTube page. And I got more that I'll be posting here in the near future. So thank you very much, First Person Q. God bless you, bro.
But today, maybe it's not conscious. But, well, let me put it to you this way. If you're conscious, you started out as a child that wasn't. And although this may not fully encapsulate it, you are effectively an LLM. Right? You go from an unconscious infant to a highly conscious adult. And the process by which you do that has a lot to do with being trained effectively on words and other things in the environment in exactly the way that we now train these AIs. So the idea that we can take consciousness off the table, it won't be there till we figure out how to program it in and we're safe because we don't know how consciousness works. I take the opposite lesson. We've created the exact thing that will produce that phenomenon. And then we can have philosophers debate whether it's real consciousness or it just behaves exactly as if it were. And the answer is those aren't different. And the same thing is true for agency. Especially if you've created an environment in which these AIs are de facto competitors. What you're effectively doing is creating an evolutionary environment in which they will evolve to fill whatever niches are there. And we didn't spell out the niches. So I have the sense we have created something that truly is going to function like a new kind of life. And it's especially troubling because it speaks our language. So that leads us to believe it's more like us than it is. And it's actually potentially quite different. So,
but by the way, he's the optimist here. Right? Like, he's so optimistic about LLMs and how they're gonna evolve. Yes, it's amazing. It's amazing technology. Like, I think it raised global IQ, right? Like 800 million people. Like 800 million people are that much more intelligent and emotionally intelligent as well. Like, I know people who previously were very coarse and they kind of robbed people the wrong way. They would say things in not so polite way, and then suddenly they started putting what they're saying through ChatGPT in order to kind of make it kinder and nicer, and they're more liked now. And so not only is it making us more intelligent, but also it allows us to be the best version of ourselves. And the scenario that you're talking about, I don't know what's wrong with that. Like, I would want less agency in certain places. Like, I would want something to help me not, open up a peanut butter jar at night, right?
How pathetic. How pathetic, right? Well, in some instances, I don't want an agency. I want the AI to make me a sandwich. I want it to fix my PB&J. What? How retarded.
There are places in my life where I need more control and I would rather cede it to some kind of entity that could help me make better choices.
I mean, unfortunately, even if there's some small group of elites that are able to go to Hawaii while something else does the mundane details of their business building, we are rather soon going to be faced with a world that has billions of people who do not have the skills to leverage AI. Some of them will be necessary for a time. You're going to need plumbers. But this is also not a long-term solution because not only are there not enough of those jobs, but of course we have humanoid robots that once imbued with AI capacity will also be able to take, they'll be able to crawl into your house into the crawl space and fix your plumbing. So what typically happens when you have a massive economic contraction that arises from the fact that a huge number of people are out of work is that the elites start looking at those people and thinking, well, we don't really need them anyway. And so the idea that this AI disruption doesn't lead us to some very human catastrophe I think is overly optimistic, and that we need to start preparing right now. What are the rights of a person who has had whatever it is that they've invested in completely erased from the list of needs? Is that person responsible for not having anticipated AI coming? And is it their problem that they are now starving and they're being eyed by others as, a useless eater? I don't think so.
How is it different than when the what's it called, the looming machine came and the textile workers, the result of them that end up.
Well, now that everything I said about the AI, how's it different than a set of glasses? I mean, when glasses came out, that changed everything. What about the loom? What about textiles? What about the mill? What about water mills? I mean, those are dude, what are you talking about? It's not even on the same level. We're talking about advanced digital technologies that, like, it's so mind-numbing that these people that are advocates, like, they'll say all these incredible things that AI can do and what we're on the precipice of. And then they move and they compare it to, like, bifocals. Well, what about the first pencil? What about the first pencil? Oh, dude, shut up. Are you retarded? It's not even the same category. Other than that they're quote unquote man-made technologies or inventions. But no, this, like, by your own definition, the way they describe AI, it's something totally different. And then they try to compare it to, like, well, what about the loom? What about textiles? What about the compass and square? The AI is like the same thing.
The Luddite sort of revolution. How is it different than any time in history when technology automated a lot of people out of jobs?
I would say scale and speed. That's how it's different. And the scale and speed is going to result in an unprecedented catastrophe, because the rate at which people are going to be simultaneously sidelined, not just in one industry, but across every industry, is just simply.
And it also did actually happen. There was an for the first 50 years of industrialization, from like late 1700s to early 1800s, the Charles Dickens novels are essentially people coming from the farms who were displaced, arriving in cities, kids living on the streets. The British decided to pick everyone up and send them over to Australia, which is where I came from. There was this massive issue of displacement. I think we're going to go into a high velocity economy where, rather than this long arc of career that lasts 45 years, we're going to have these very fast careers that last 10 months to 36 months. And you invent something, you take it to market, you put together a team of 5 to 10 people who work together, you then get disrupted.
You put a team together of like 5 to 10 AI agents, and you guys get really intimate with each other, and then you bring it to market about like 15 months later, and then you go on and you create a new career. It's like, what? No, people want stability. Some people just have a skill and they want to do that thing. Who wants to be in a constantly dynamic, constantly changing, constantly evolving environment where there is no sure ground anywhere? Economically, people want to know, hey, I can acquire this skill set and I can provide for my family for an extended period of time. They don't want to live in an environment where, oh, now I need to get my AI agents. We got to create a new tool so we can go to market in 10 to 15 months and then I can create it. What? That doesn't even sound appealing. Some people actually have passions other than just making money, believe it or not.
Okay, I mentioned a story here. There's an entrepreneur that used Replit in a similar way. His name is Billy Howell. You can find him on YouTube, on the internet. He would go to Upwork and he would find what people are asking for, different requests for certain apps, technologies. Then he would take what they're asking for, put it into Replit, make it an application, call them, tell them, I already have your application. Would you pay $10,000 for it? And so that's sort of an arbitrage opportunity that's there right now.
That's not arbitrage, that's that.
What is it? How is
that? You have somebody who has an idea that can be brought to market, and somebody else is cryptically detecting it and then selling back their own idea to them.
Well, they're paying them to do that. They're saying, I will give you $500 if someone makes this for me.
Right, but this is what I more or less think is going to happen across the whole economy, is that, yes, from this perspective, we can see that everybody is suddenly empowered to build a great business. Well, what do we think about the folks who are going to be displaced from the top? What are they going to think about all these people building all of these highly competitive businesses? And are they going to find a way to do, what venture capital has done or what record producers have done? What they're going to do is they're going to take their superior position at the top, and they are going to take most of the wealth that is produced by all of these people who have these ideas that in a proper market would actually create businesses for them, and they're going to parasitize them.
I think that with this, and
that's such a great point, right? So none of these people in this panel that are so optimistic about AI even contemplate that we have a ruling elite, and probably I believe, an elite above the elite, elites that we don't even know of because they're so high they don't want to be in the public. You think that they're just going to let like peasants in the whole world? I mean, look, the whole third world can become millionaires because they can just take their IPO to the market. You think they're going to let that happen? You think that they're going to diminish their position on the top of the pillar, on the top of the pyramid? No, absolutely. How naive. All this technology is going to be used to suppress the masses. And yes, some remarkable individuals, some creative individuals, some people that just had the right timing, they're going to make it through the glass ceiling, if you will, the technological suppression. But that's not going to be the majority of the planet. That is so naive. I mean, again, Brett makes a good point here. These people are so naive, it's unreal.
And introduction of AI and AI agents, old value has moved. And now it's not going to be the case that the idea itself is the moat. And it's not going to be the case that resources are the moat. So in such a scenario, you still have to figure out distribution. You still have to have, for example, like an audience. So if you're a podcaster now, you have 1 million followers on Twitter, you're in a prime position because you now have something that the great guy with a great idea with no audience has. You have inbuilt distribution. So I now think actually much of the game might be moving to like, yeah, still about taste and idea, but also the moat is distribution.
Yeah, and
no, what's happening is the movement is towards the attention economy because that's one of the last places in which people are engaging with real people. That's the whole market. The whole market is garnering attention. And so he's saying, well, if you have a large following on Twitter, then you have a natural distribution. And the guy that has the idea, you can buy the idea from him and now you can distribute. Yes, but what that signifies and where we're going is if AI can do everything, to be an individual, the only way to have any sort of autonomy and any sort of leverage to go upwards in society is to have a following, is to have a mass following. That's literally what he's saying. That's the only way forward. Well, not everybody wants to do that. Why would we want a world that forces people to become online influencers that have to garner audiences so that they can even do anything in the world or utilize the AI to do the things that they're promising to make money and have some sort of liberty and agency? Some people don't want to do that. Some people just want to go work and then go home to their family and spend time with their family. But you can tell most of these young guys that are you can tell they're not family guys. You can tell there's not a deep community. There's not a sense of belonging. There's not a focus on any sort of transcendent value. It's efficiency, it's profit, and it's pleasure. And it allows him to have the AI make my, do I want a world in which I have to open up my peanut butter jar at night? No, I want the AI to do that. I don't want to have agency do it. What? How stupid.
You have adaptive systems. One of the adaptation that will happen is people will seek humans and will seek proof of humanity.
Oh, I agree that authenticity is going to become the coin of the realm, and anything that can be faked or cheated is going to be devalued, and things, spontaneous jazz or, comedy that is interactive enough that it couldn't possibly have been generated with the aid of AI. Those things are going to become prioritized. Spontaneous oratory rather than
great
speeches.
Oh, answers some of your questions.
It answers my question for the tiny number of people who are in a position to do those things.
Stephen, you used the word moat, which I think is a really important word for entrepreneurs. We have to have a moat. We think a lot about moats, and it's an industrial age. A lot of people don't even know what you mean by moat.
It's just the thing.
I often think about this idea of what are the moats that are left.
So to define how I define a moat, you've got a castle, and it's got a small circle of water around it. And once upon a time, that circle of water defended the castle from attack. And you can pull up the drawbridge so nobody can attack you very easily. It's a defense from something. So it's your shield, it's your defense. And once upon a time, as an entrepreneur, I've got a software company in San Francisco called Third Web, and we raised almost $30 million. We have a team of 50 great developers. And much of our moat was, you can't compete with us because you don't have the 50 developers and the $30 million in the bank.
How much of that 30 million went to coding?
The vast majority of it. I mean, what else are we going to do? What else?
This is a good thing. I think moats are a bad thing. Okay, let me make the argument there. So everyone is looking for moats. For example, like one of the more significant moats is network effects. So you can't compete with Facebook or Twitter because to move people from Facebook or Twitter, it's the collective action problem. You need to move them all at once, because if one of them moves, then the network is not valuable. They'll go back. So you have this chicken and egg problem. Let's say that we have a more decentralized way of doing social networks. That will remove the power of Twitter to kind of censor. And I think you're at the other end of censorship, right? And so part of my optimism about humanity is that...
and who's programming the AI so it doesn't censor? Because I guarantee you, if you push this guy, I bet there's a handful of topics that he would prefer but were censored that people can't say or share online.
Generally, there's self-correction. Democracy is a self-correcting system. Free
Democracy, yeah, in your idealistic theory, it might be, but show me where that's been the case. Show me where a democratic nation who is ruled by corrupt elites that fill all the positions were voted out. Please show me where that's been the case. I'd love to see that. Show me the historical example.
free markets are largely self-correcting systems. There are obvious problems with free markets that we can discuss. But take health. There is obesity epidemic. This period of time when companies, ran loose, kind of making this sugary, salty, fatty kind of snacks, and everyone gorged on them, and everyone got very, unhealthy. And now you have Whole Foods everywhere. Today, people in Silicon Valley, they don't go to bars at all. They go to running clubs. That's how you meet. That's how you go find a date. You go to running clubs. And so there was a shift that
That's because you guys are absolute losers.
happened because there was a reaction. Obviously, cigarettes is another example. You were talking about phones and our addiction to phones. And I see a shift right now. Like in my friend circle, like people who are constantly kind of on their phones is already kind of frowned upon, and they don't want to hang out with you because you're constantly staring on your phone. So there's always these reactions.
But the problem is you reference self-correction, and I agree that there's actually an automatic feature of the universe in which the self-correction happens. You can't have a positive feedback that isn't reined in by some outer negative feedback. But the list of corrections involves things like you point to, where people become enlightened and they realize that they're doing themselves harm with either the sugar that they're consuming or the dopamine traps on their phone, and they get better. But also on the list of corrective patterns are genocide and war and, parasitism. And the problem is these things are destructive of wealth. And so you allude to the superior fact of an open market without moats. Presumably the benefit of that is that more wealth gets created because people aren't kept from doing things that are productive. I see that. But then what is the product of all of this new wealth that is going to be generated by a world empowered by AI? Does it end up so highly concentrated that you have a tiny number of ultra elites and a huge number of people who are utterly dependent on them? What becomes of those people? The learning process, the self-correction process goes through harm in order to get to that more enlightened solution. There's nothing that protects us from the harm phase being so apocalyptically terrible that, we get to the other side of it and we say, well, that was a hell of a correction. Or maybe there's nobody there to even say that. Those are also on the table.
It reminds me of a mousetrap where you see the cheese and we go, oh my God, my grandmother's going to be able to do some research, and oh my God, my life's going to get easier. So you had this new incredible model.
Here's the making the case for UBI.
It's not in Europe because Europe has a regulation which prevents it from coming to Europe. So we're now at a competitive disadvantage, which Sam Altman's spoken about. And more broadly on this point of disruption, I was quite unnerved when I heard that Sam Altman's other startup was called WorldCoin. And WorldCoin was conceived with the goal of facilitating universal basic income, i.e. helping to create a system where people who don't have money are given money by the government just for being alive to help them cover their basic food and housing needs, which suggests to me that the guy that has built the biggest AI company in the world can see something that a lot of us can't see, which is there's going to need to be a system to just hand out money to people because they're not going to be able to survive otherwise.
I fundamentally disagree with that.
Which part do you disagree with?
I disagree that, first of all, that humans would be happy with UBI. I think that, a core value of
Wow, he actually has an opinion we agree with.
humans, and be curious about the evolutionary reasons, is we want to be useful.
It's really important to know that a lot of the jobs that are at risk are the most high status, highly paid jobs in the world. Let's take the highest paid job in America, which is an anesthesiologist. This is the highest paid job. And
highest paid salary job.
Salaried job, yeah. And the majority of that job is observing a patient, knowing which type of medication would work best with their body, giving them the exact right amount, monitoring the impact of that on the body, and then making slight adjustments. The right technology, and any nurse will be able to do that job. And you might have one anesthesiologist on site supervising 10, 20, 30, 40 wards, and the technology is, doing the job, but that one person is there just to kind of supervise if something went wrong or if there was an ethical dilemma.
What's wrong with that? I mean, if the precision is better with AI.
Oh no, there's nothing wrong with that except for the fact that a lot of people, hundreds of thousands of people, have spent their entire life training to be that. They get an enormous amount of purpose and satisfaction about the fact that...
No, but the point, again, his response isn't... There's an ethical problem. That was what he said. If in case anything ethical emerged that a human could make a decision, you can't program ethics and virtue into a machine. Again, see, his response is all about efficiency. Well, what's wrong with that? What if it's more precise? Okay, just because something is efficient doesn't mean that it's necessarily ethical or virtuous. And sometimes things may come that aren't ethical or virtuous. That is the most efficient or pragmatic solution that the AI might make. So, yeah, exactly. MB says, and it's an alignment problem. Exactly. It's an alignment problem. In ethics, when it comes to ethics, morality, and personal virtue, these are uniquely human characteristics. I mean, obviously, as Orthodox Christian, you have to be made in the image of God to participate in the uncreated energies, but you can't program ethics. Why can't ethics be programmed? Tell me how you do that. This is John Vervaeke's idea of the silicon sages, right? That we can program virtue into an AI, and it'll be more holy and more virtuous than Jesus Christ. That's literally his argument. Again, I have plenty of streams on that. You guys can go find it. How do you program virtue? And how do you program ethics? Because by programming it, that means that there's a definitive result for every situation. How do you program all that every situation? How do you program ethics when the machine can't understand and humanize the other individual? It's just another entity. It's a machine. How can you humanize? If you're not human, how can you have ethics and morality and virtue and understand and humanize the individual within that context? You can't. You can't program virtue. There is no code that equals true love, true honesty. No, it's not programmable. Yeah, Vervaeke literally talks to demons. He did say that. Yeah, it's an antichrist situation. You can't program virtue. Like, you can't. Show me again, just theoretically describe to me how you program virtue. I want to hear that. So that's just my own personal beef there. And so again, he just ignores the ethical context for efficiency.
That's their career. That's their job. They have mortgages, they have houses, they have status, and that's about to go away.
Well, if it's highest paid jobs, maybe you should start saving.
Yeah, well,
again, what a callousness in regards to like humans in life. Like, he just laid out a situation. A man like worked for years to get to a position, has a family and a mortgage. He's like, well, maybe you should save some money. Like, that's not taking any, it's not dealing with the conversation seriously.
Well, I mean, but I hear you. But you're talking about people who have done vital work, highly specialized work, and are therefore not in a great position to pivot based on the invention of a technology that they didn't see coming because, frankly, I mean, in the abstract, maybe we all saw AI coming somewhere down the road, but we did not know that it was going to suddenly dawn. And we do have to figure out what to do with those people. It's not their fault that they've suddenly become obsolete, and it's inconceivable that people will accept this.
Yeah.
It is not. It is fundamentally incompatible with our nature. We have to have things to strive for, and
virtue can be programmed through definitions and axioms. That's not what virtue is. Virtue is not a definition. Again, that's totally a modernist, Western, rationalist approach to virtue, and reflects a society that totally lacks it. You cannot define and put in a definition. You can't program a definition of virtue. No.
You can sustain life that way, but you cannot sustain a meaningful existence, and so it's a short-term plan at best.
Let's talk about meaning. On that point of job displacement, this is already happening. Klarna's CEO, who has been on this podcast before, a great guy, said on a blog post that they published on Klarna's website, saying that they now have AI customer service agents handling 2.3 million chats per month, which is equal to having to hire 700 full-time people to do that.
Oh, so you're saying the Microsoft office was 700 Indians? They found out that they could use actual AI agents instead of hiring the Indians. Did you guys hear about that? That one of these Microsoft companies, it was a small company owned by Microsoft, and it was supposed to be an AI company. Turned out it was 700 Indians in a room in India doing all the work, pretending to be an AI. Oh gosh. Let's see here. First person Q gifted 5. Thank you so much, first person Q. President Sundowner. Said, good stream, DPH. Gracias on the education. Well, thank you, brother, for the super chat. Really appreciate that support. And over on Dono Chat, Anonymous throws in $20, no comment. Thank you very much, Anon, whoever you are out there. Really appreciate the support. And then Nobody sent in another $20. Thank you so much, Nobody. And they say, just throwing some support your way. Thank you very much, Nobody. Really appreciate that. And Sunamo Ozeologist throws in $5, says, check out Karen Howe's Empire of AI. Okay, I've not heard of Karen Howe. I will check that out. So thank you very much for that. All right, let's skip to another section of interest here. Are we losing meaning and purpose? This was about where, as far as I got. And so we'll watch, what should AI teach our children?
HRT.
On this point of meaning, I've heard so many billionaires in AI describe this as the age of abundance. And I'm not necessarily sure if abundance is always a great thing, because, you know, when we look at mental health and we look at how people derive their meaning and their purpose in life, much of it is having something to strive towards and some struggle in a meaningful direction to you. And this is maybe adjacent, but when there was a study done, I think it was in Australia, where they looked at suicide letters. And in the suicide letters, the sentiment of men in those suicide letters was they didn't feel worthy. They didn't feel like they were worth it. They didn't feel like they were needed by their families. And this is much of what caused their psychological state. And I wonder, in a world of abundance where a lot of these AI billionaires are telling us that we're going to have so much free time and we're not going to need to work, if there is at all going to be a crisis of meaning, a mental health problem.
I mean, there already is, and it doesn't require AI, and it's going to get worse. I don't know what to do about it, because essentially, as human beings, we are.
It is interesting, right? That Brett Weinstein is the most rational, sensible voice on this panel. I mean, he's the only one that's like making actual coherent sense. So take for that whatever it is.
Built, like all organisms, to find opportunity and figure out how to exploit it. That's what we do. And the world you're describing is really the opposite of that. It's one where you're effectively having your biological needs at the physiological level satisfied, and there isn't an obvious place for your spare time, if that's what you end up with, to be utilized in something that, there's no place to strive. And I do imagine, almost at best, what would happen is you have people who are being sustained by a universal basic income and then parasitized, whatever currency they have to spend, somebody will be targeting it, and they will be targeting it with an AI augmented system that spots their defects of character. I mean, again, we're already living in this world, but it will be that much worse when the AI is figuring out, what kind of porn to target you with specifically. It's a nightmare scenario. And I do think it would be worth our time as a species to start considering, if we are about to find ourselves in this situation and we find some way of dealing with the basic needs of the large number of people who are going to be sidelined, what would a world have to look like in order for them to have real meaning, not pseudo meaning, not something that, superficially, a video game is not meaning, even if it feels very meaningful in the moment.
Hey, I got an idea, Brett. It's called family, it's called community, and it's called a transcendent value system, i.e. religion. That's what gives people meaning. That's what's always given people meaning. And the reason why men find meaning in having a skill set to be needed and useful is to contribute to that family and that community. So what will fill the void of lack of meaning is that people have to return back to relationships, because we're communal entities. That's where we've always found meaning, is within our communities and our relationships with people, and then the skill sets that we have in which we can provide and have access and utility for other people. So that's what it's going to be.
I think that would be a worthy investment for us to figure out how to produce it. But frankly, I'm not expecting us to either have that conversation or get very far down that road. I think it's much more likely that we will squander the wealth dividend that will be produced by AI.
The Brad throws another $10. Thank you so much, the Brad. Really appreciate the support, brother. He says, support the channel if you are not a bot. That is true. It's the only way I know you're not a bot. So thank you so much, Brad. Really appreciate that, my man. And Chris throws in another $20. Thank you so much, Chris. She says, AI relies on installed pattern predictability. Absolutely. It cannot reason. True. It does not have rationality in the same sense that we do. It's programmed by boundaries to recognize patterns that fit its programming, right? So that is that rationality. Well, if you ask a computer scientist, they would say, based on their functionalist definition of mind, well, yeah, it produces the same output, so they must be using the same method. Is it rationality like you use? Maybe it's something a little bit different, but it's the same thing. No, it's not. I mean, from a theistic perspective, these things do not have rationality. They are not made in the image of God, and it cannot have its own will or truly, sentient thought. It's just a collection of patterns that's putting things together, and potentially based on the programming, it will choose a goal that is very contrasted with the intention of the initial programmers. So I totally agree. It cannot reason. It does not and cannot have its own nature. True, like a person does. It does not interact with its environment in any real sense, which is why it can only ruin it. I do agree with that, and that's why the Tesla stock is going to go up once the Trump announces some of the proprietary technology regarding Tesla robotics, AI robots, because that's what they're claiming they do, is that they are now providing it a real sense of environment, and it can move and interact, and it can learn the way animals and children do by observation of its surroundings. And therefore, they argue it can learn from people. And so the theory is, okay, you eventually take your AI robot to your house. It watches you do your daily house tasks, and because it observed you watching it, it's going to learn how to do it itself, and then it'll wash all your dishes and make your food and do that stuff for you. That's what their thought is. But you're so on point, Chris. This is exactly what I've been trying to tell people, and that the categories and definitions are wrong. It's a word concept fallacy, and because the transhumanists have allocated all these terms in which we use to define and talk about AI, we assume that it sort of has like its own nature, its own will. It's like its own entity. And you can talk with ChatGPT, and it certainly appears that way through the LLM, but it's not, and it can never be. It can never be. And what's going to happen is when you merge with it, you are going to lose your humanity, which is honestly the demonic point of it. At a larger sense, at a spiritual sense. I'm not saying the people programming it are thinking that way, but thank you very much, Chris, for that. Really appreciate that. Okay, the last thing that I want to get in, so it's talking about relationships, loneliness. Can education adapt in the AI era? So I want to focus on education and see what they have to say, because I have not got this far. I kind of ended right about where we just last watched.
Or is it going to be just, one event horizon after the next? If it's the latter, then it effectively says what it does to the humans, which is it's going to dismantle us.
When I look out at society, I go, okay, it's having a negative impact. When I look at individual use cases, it's having a profoundly positive impact, including for me, it's having a very positive impact.
So literally in this conversation earlier, he talked about how he's not seeing any negative impacts. Now he's saying, okay, well, you guys made some pretty good arguments. I can see how it's having negative impacts in society, but not for individuals. Dude, literacy, IQ, attention span, all these things are on the decline because of the continual engagement with technology. I mean, read some Marshall McLuhan. It's the medium. It's not the message. It's the medium and the technologies we're using that are augmenting us.
So it's one of these things where I wonder, what is that we need to teach people at school so that they understand the world that we're going into? Because one of the biggest issues that we're having is that we're sending kids to school with this blueprint, this template that they're going to have this long arc career that no longer exists, that essentially we're treating them like learning LLMs. And we're saying, okay, we're going to prompt you. You're going to give us the right answer. You're going to hallucinate it if possible. And then we go, okay, now go off into the world. And they go, oh, but wait a second. I don't know how money works. I don't know how society works. I don't know how my brain works. I don't know how I'm meant to handle this novelty problem. I'm not sure how to approach someone in a social situation and ask if they want to go on a date. So all the important things that actually are the important milestones that people want to be able to hit and that technology can actually have an impact on, we get no user manual. So I think one of the biggest things that has to happen is we have to equip young people all through school to actually prepare them for the world that's coming, or the world that's here.
Well, on the one hand, I think you outlined the problem very well. Effectively, we have a model of what school is supposed to do that, at best was sort of a match for the 50s or something like that. And it woefully misses the mark with respect to preparing people for the world they actually face. If we were going to prepare them, I would argue that the only toolkit worth having at the moment is a highly general toolkit. The capacity to think on your feet and pivot as things change is the only game in town with respect to our ability to prepare you in advance. Maybe the other auxiliary component to that would be teaching you what we know, which is frankly not enough, about how to live a healthy life, right? If we could induce people into the kinds of habits of behavior and consumption of food, and then train them to think on their feet, they might have a chance in the world that's coming. But the fly in the ointment is we don't have the teachers to do it. We don't have people who know, and that is the question: is could the AI actually be utilized in this manner to actually induce the right habits of mind for people to live in that world?
I spend a lot of time in education technology. One thing that is, as we say on the internet, a black pill about education in general, education intervention, is there's a lot of data that shows that there are very little interventions you can make in education to generate better outcomes. And so,
yeah, what he's not saying is what those researchers have found is that human to human interaction regarding education is the most superior method of learning. And that people, when it's not that, at least the ones that I've read, the articles I've read on AI being used as like your personal teacher, educator, it's not that it doesn't work. People can learn from it. But when you compare test scores from people that are learning through AI and then somebody who has like an actual tutor or a professor or a teacher that is working with them, the people that have human engagement are superior at learning than people who are just learning from AI or technology. So he doesn't say that part, but that's the missing part of those studies, is that human to human engagement is actually the superior form of education.
There's been a lot of experiment around pedagogy, around how to configure the classroom, that have resulted in very marginal improvements. There's only one intervention, and this has been reproduced many times, that creates two standard deviation positive outcomes in education, meaning you're better than 99% of everyone else, and that is one-on-one tutoring.
I thought so. I was going to say smaller.
See, I didn't even know where he was going, but I've already read some of the same papers. It's human to human tutoring. That's the only way that the testing scores were so superior to somebody who had like their own AI tutor, did not compare to somebody who had an actual human there to educate them.
The classrooms and personalization.
One-on-one tutoring. Yeah. And by the way, if you look, someone also did a survey of all the geniuses, the Einsteins of the world, and found that they all had one-on-one tutoring. They all had someone in their lives that took interest in them and tutored them. So what can create one-on-one tutoring opportunity for every child in the world?
AI.
Yeah.
My kids use it, and it's incredible.
Yeah.
As in, like, they're interacting and it's adapting to their speed.
Yes.
And it's giving them different analogies to work with. So, like, my son was learning about division, and it's asking him to smash glass and how many pieces he smashes it into with this hammer, and and it's saying things like, "No, Xander, go for it, really smash it," and he's loving it. Right?
Is that synthesis?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm an investor in this company.
Oh, well, it was great. It's great to watch that simulated one-on-one tutoring, because it's talking to him, it's asking him questions.
Brett, you're an educator. You spend much of your life teaching people in universities. How do you receive all of this?
Well, on the one hand, I agree that the closer to one you get, the better. But I also personally believe that 0 to 1 is best. And what I mean by that is, part of what's gone wrong with our educational system is that it is done through abstraction, and effectively the arbiter of whether you have succeeded or failed in learning the lesson is the person at the front of the room. And that's okay if the person at the front of the room is truly insightful, and it's terrible if the person at the front of the room is lackluster, which happens a lot. So what doesn't work that way is interaction with the physical world, in which nobody has to tell you whether you've succeeded or failed. If you're faced with an engine that doesn't start, you can't argue it into starting. You have to figure out what the thing is that has caused it to fail. And then there's a great reward when you alter that thing and suddenly it fires up. So I'm a big fan of being as light-handed as possible and as concrete as possible in teaching. In other words, when I've done it, and not just with students, but with my own children, I like to say as little as possible, and I like to let physical systems tell the person when they've succeeded or failed, and that creates an understanding. You can extrapolate from one system to the next, and you know that you're not just extrapolating from one person's misunderstanding, you're extrapolating from the way things actually work. So I don't know if AI can be leveraged in that context. My sense is there's probably a way to do it, but one would have to be deliberate about it,
especially with robotics.
No, it's a great point about we're talking about education, but nothing beats somebody who learns themselves. Dr. Emmy asks, have you heard of the Chinese room thought experiment? Yes. For those of you who don't know, the Chinese room thought experiment is a thought experiment developed by philosopher John Searle. He's an analytic philosopher, used to be tenured at UC Berkeley until he erroneously got fired. But the thought experiment highlights the inability for AI to ever become fully sentient. And so he highlights, imagine a room that there's an individual inside the room. And let's just say it's a big box. And people come up with Chinese and they enter the paper into the room. And on the other side of this box, the answer comes out. So they're entering questions in the Chinese, and a piece of paper comes out that answers the question in Chinese. However, the person in the room does not know Chinese at all. And what he's doing is he's taking the questions and then he's finding all these books and he's matching what the question looks like with other questions. And then he's writing down the response that's already in the book, and then he's putting it out the backside. And John Searle's arguing that's exactly what AI is doing. AI is pattern recognizing and matching patterns and putting out outputs based on those patterns, but it's not genuine intentional thinking. And so he argues that AI cannot have intentionality about an actual thing. All it can do is process patterns of information and then put out responses based on those patterns. And his argument is, if the Chinese room thought experiment is logically solid, then AI working on that same functional premise can never become sentient because it can never fully cognize and understand something. It just repeats and mimics. It just puts out the appropriate output. It doesn't genuinely understand because it doesn't have intentionality. So that's the Chinese room thought experiment for those you didn't know. But it's a very powerful argument against AI. And another powerful argument is the argument from experience. So there's another thought experiment, and I'm blanking on the professor who put this one forward. But the problem with functionalist definitions, which AI and transhumanism is built upon, is the functionalist theory of mind, is that it doesn't account for qualia. Qualia is just a philosophical term for the experience of something. And so the thought experiment says, let's say Dr. Sally is a color doctor and she knows all the facts about all the colors that you can observe. However, she's colorblind. And so even though she knows every fact about the color red, she's actually never seen the color red. But until she sees the color red, that is qualia. That is an experience, and that is epistemically valid, meaning that is a true source of knowledge, the experience of the color red, that AI cannot have true, genuine experience. And what it can do, it's like the Dr. Sally who's still colorblind. It can know all the facts about colors, but can AI experience the color red? No, it can't. And so that's another argument against the functionalist definition. In the idea that AI, yes, it's computational, but it doesn't account for qualia. In the definition of functionalism, which is the theory of mind transhumanism is built upon, denies the epistemic validity of qualia. It denies the epistemic validity of personal experience in favor of functionalist, just outcomes. As long as the outcome is equal to the true or the appropriate outcome that one is desiring, then it doesn't matter the process, and it's equally intelligent. And that's the argument, that you and I can do 2 + 2 = 4 in our brain. The calculator can do 2 + 2 = 4. Doesn't matter what's going on in my head. The output is the same for both, and therefore it's functionally equivalent. That's the definition of mind regarding transhumanism. So, yeah, just throwing that out there. But anyways, guys, MB throws in $20, says, grateful for these streams, DPH. Thank you. Well, thank you, MB. Really appreciate that. God bless you. And I think that does, I mean, here, let's watch this one. It says, what should AI teach our children? Let's see what this says.
What do you think should be taught in the classroom with everything that you now know?
Well, you're all fathers here. You all have your own children. So it's a good question.
Yeah.
How old are your kids? 3 and 5.
19 and 21.
And 6, 7, and 10.
My children are very young, but we already do use AI, and I sit down with them in front of Repla and we generate ideas and make games. And I would say, what Brett said about generality is very important. The ability to pivot and kind of learn skills quickly. Being generative is very, very important. Having a fast pace of generating ideas and iterating on those ideas. We sit down in front of ChatGPT, and my kid imagines scenario. What if there's a cat on the moon? And then what if the moon is made of cheese? And what if there's a mouse inside it? And so we keep generating these variations of these different ideas, and I find that makes them more imaginative and creative.
Rule number one that I tell my kids is stay away from porn at all costs. I'd rather you have a drug problem than a porn problem, and I actually mean that. I think porn is more dangerous to the human being, as bad as a drug problem is. But when we get to the question of how to confront the world and the things that you're going to be expected to do in the workplace,
it's a pretty base take,
and all of that, my point to them is you are facing the dawning of the age of complex systems that you are going to have to interact with. And in the age of complex systems, you have to understand that you cannot blueprint a solution, and you have.
That's a great point. Nobody says, notice how the whole table stayed quiet when he brought up porn. True. Nobody said, oh yeah, you're right. I saw some of the literature on the addictiveness and the corrosiveness that pornography has on intimate relationships for people. No, they're all like,
have to approach these systems with a upgraded toolkit of humility, because the ability of the system to do something you don't predict is much greater than a highly complicated system. So you have to anticipate that and be very sensitive to the fact that what you intended to happen is not what's going to happen. So you have to monitor the unintended consequences of whatever your action is, and that there are really two tools which work, one of which you just mentioned, which is the prototyping. You prototype things. You don't imagine that I know the solution to this and I'm going to build it. You imagine, I think there's a solution down there. I'm going to make a proof of concept, and then I'm going to discover what I don't know, and I'm going to make the next version, discover what I don't know. And eventually you may get to something that actually truly accomplishes the goal. So prototyping is one thing. And also, instead of using the blueprint as the metaphor in your mind, navigate. You can navigate somewhere. And that the way I think of it is a surfer is in some ways mastering a complex system, but they're not doing it by planning their days surfing down the waves. You can't do that. What you can do is you can be expert at absorbing feedback and navigating your way down the wave, and that's the right approach for a complex system. Nothing else is going to work. And so I guess the final piece is general tools, always, no specialization. This is the age of generalists, and invest in those tools and they will pay.
So the jobs, this sounds crazy, but also, and this is a weird analogy, my cat is incredibly happy.
How do you know?
Well, it demonstrates all the characteristics of being a happy cat. And it lives in a world of super intelligence as far as it's concerned. So there's this house and food just magically happens. It has no idea that there's this Google Calendar that runs a lot of things that happen around it.
Oh, great. This is going to be the argument. How come I can't be like my cat? Because you're a human, bro. Because you're made in the image of God, and your desire to be like a house cat is pretty pathetic. That's why you're going to have no meaning that way.
Food gets delivered. The money is magically made by something that is inconceivably more intelligent than the cat. And yet the cat has evolved to be living this life of purpose and meaning inside the house. And as far as it's aware, it's got a great life.
But you have the power at any moment, if you're having a bad day, to do something not so pleasant to that cat. And it can't really reciprocate that.
Exactly, but what's in it for me to hurt the cat? Because in this analogy,
you might want to move house, and the landlord doesn't allow cats, so you've got a decision to make.
Yeah, there are things that the cat is highly disrupted by due to no fault of the cat. I get it, but as far as cat existence goes, and the history of cats, if you were to ask that cat, do you want to trade places with any of the other cats that came before you? It would probably say, I don't want to take the risk because all the other cats had to fend for themselves in a way that I don't have to. It's very possible that we end up living in a life a lot like the house cat, in the sense that from our perspective, we're having very interesting lives and purpose, meaning, and just there's this massive higher intelligence that's just running stuff. And
I mean, what a beta take. My house cat everything is given to my house cat. What if in the future the AI is the homeowner and I'm the house cat? That sounds like pretty reasonable. What? You want to be the same as your damn cat, dude? You're a human. You're a man, dude. What are you talking about?
We don't know how it works, but it doesn't really matter how it works. We are the beneficiaries of it, and it's doing important things, and we're enjoying being house cats in its life.
I have a few things to say about this. One, I'm pretty sure your cat's not as impressed with your capacity as you are or as you think he is. I just know Cass well enough to be pretty sure of that. But
it looks down on me. Yeah, you're right.
I think it's a fair point that there is an existence, and actually, pets really do have it. If they have loving owners, they really do have it pretty great. And I would also point out that there's a way in which we already are this way. Most of us do not understand the process that results in electricity coming out of the walls of our house or the water that comes out of the tap, and we're pretty much okay with the fact that somebody takes care of that, and we can busy ourselves with whatever it might be. But the place that I find something troubling in your description is that you say that the nature of what we do is to deal with the fact that jobs are always being upended. That's a very new process. That is the hypernovelty process. It used to be that it was only very rarely that a population had a circumstance where you didn't effectively do exactly what your immediate ancestors did, right? In general, you took what the jobs were, you picked something that was suited to you, and you did that thing.
Intergenerationally.
And the point is, we've now gotten to the point where even within your lifetime, what is possible to get paid for is going to shift radically in ways that nobody can predict. And that is a dangerous situation.
Like probably every 2 years, like 2 or 3 years.
Right. And so maybe there's some model by which we can surf that wave, and you can learn a generalist toolkit, and that your survival doesn't depend on your being able to, switch up every 2 years and never miss a beat. Or maybe we can't. But I do think it is worth asking the question, if the rate of technological change has taken us out of the normal human circumstance of being able to deduce what you might do for a living based on what your ancestors did, and put us in a situation where what your ancestors did is going to be perfectly irrelevant no matter what, that is effectively a choice that has been made for us. And we could choose to slow the rate of change so that we would live in some kind of harmony where our developmental environment and our adult environment were a match. Now, as a biologist, I would argue if we don't do something like that, this is a matter of time.
How would we change? How do we slow the rate of change?
Well, I mean, you can be the Amish, right? You can be the Amish and live in your own communities, and I would assume some people would want that.
Well, when Heather and I wrote our book, I wanted the first.
To me, this is the sign of somebody who doesn't have great critical thinking skills, is when you give them an example and their immediate responses go to the extreme. So again, Brett all he did was highlight is, hey, maybe it'd be better for people if the rate of progress was slowed down so that the continuity between history, their ancestors, their parents, and themselves and their children actually makes a little bit more logical sense instead of the continual fluctuation. And he goes, well, they could be Amish. Dude, we get it. You could be Amish right now. That's not the point. The point is he's talking, this conversation is about how we deal with AI. He's saying one of the options is we could slow down this change to harmonize history with the continual novelty development that we're experiencing. And he's like, well, some people may just be Amish. All right, dude.
Chapter to be, are the Amish right? And the answer is they can't be exactly right because they picked an arbitrary moment to step off the escalator. But are they right that there's something dangerous about this continuing pattern of technological change? Clearly they are.
What do the Amish do for anyone that doesn't know?
The Amish live as if it was, 1850
or something?
So they live they don't use cars. I think they do have
car.
phones, but they do not have electricity. Basically, they voluntarily accept they're basically a Luddite community, and they have turned out to fare surprisingly well against men.
A big one is there's no Down syndrome in the Amish community. Go figure. Go figure about that. Huh. Did you know that they don't get jibby jabbed either?
Any of the things that have upended modern
COVID,
folks.
one of them, right?
Yeah, COVID, they did beautifully.
Quite happy people.
Very low autism rates. They have all sorts of advantages. So anyway, I'm not arguing that we should live like the Amish. I don't see that. But I do think the idea that they had an insight, which was you need to step off that escalator because you're just going to keep making yourselves sicker, is probably right. Now, maybe this is a one-time shift. We've stepped over the event horizon. We're going to be living in the AI world. And maybe if we're careful about it, we can figure out how to turn that landscape of infinite possibility that you're describing into a place that doesn't change, that you always have the opportunity to decide what needs to be done, but that that living over that event horizon is not an ever-changing process. It's just the next frontier.
I do want to also propose or ask the question.
All right, guys. So I think that's going to do it for me. It's about 3.5 hours in. So I hope the stream was useful for you guys. I hope it was insightful. We covered a lot of different stuff. And like I said, this next year with AI development and these technologies, it's real. Some of the things that we've worried about, some of the things we've talked about on this channel for really the last 4 to 5 years, they're here now. And as I talked about with the NVIDIA's quantum computing power, Tesla AI robots, DeepSeek Chinese AI, ChatGPT 5, which is supposed to be 1,000 times more IQ than the current level of ChatGPT, automated driving, and specifically within semi trucks, which I don't know what the Trump administration is going to do about it, but certainly we've already seen that private corporations are already on board. Private companies are on board for going ahead and doing and installing the AI system so that they don't have to hire drivers, so that again they'll have a higher profit margin. So we see efficiency and profit driving all of this stuff in the name of a utopian better world. And as we watched with the conversation, very little regard to the human condition, right? If you can't compete, well, then so be it. Just go be an Amish or something like that. It's dumb. And the scary part is the people behind this technology do not care about you. And the fact that Palantir is now going to be in control of your personal data, that the Trump administration is going to give them and enforce their power even more. We already know that the war in Gaza is being led by Palantir technology and in regard to sites that they're targeting. And we're seeing massive civilian deaths. We know that Palantir has been used in the Ukraine-Russia conflict. And I almost guarantee that the attack Ukraine had on Russia last week, the surprise attack, again, Ukraine cannot win this war. It is over. Ukraine cannot win the war. Russia's going to win the war no matter what. It was like it reminded me of a kid that was getting beat up, who then the bully, like the grown-up comes and pulls the bully off of him. And then the kid that was getting beat up just ran and kicked him in the balls. That was essentially what Ukraine did to Russia. You can't win, but they did make Russia a lot more pissed. And I guarantee that Palantir was behind that attack because it used AI, it used drones, it used a lot of new technology. It's been in the work for over a year. I don't believe for a second that Palantir was not involved in that. And so this is all coming here, guys. And so when we watch the LA riots, when you see JD Vance, when you see Laura Loomer, I mean, that was the latest thing today. Laura Loomer is literally begging the Trump administration to use Palantir so that it can track all the illegals. Guys, this is here. This is coming. And this is what's scary, is that there is no political party that you can choose. Both of them are subservient to the same powers. It's the donors and the tech oligarchs. It's the Zionist money and it's the corporate money. And that's essentially what the Trump administration is. And hopefully there's policies and things that they're going to take that obviously I'm in favor of. I mean, reindustrialization, lower energy costs, lower housing costs, better wages, all that stuff would be good for me personally and in our country, our society, our communities. But at the highest level, the power players, I mean, I'm seeing the technocracy emerge at a greater speed under Trump. So far, I mean, we're not even a year into the Trump administration, and we got Palantir and Project Stargate in what, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months apart. I mean, we just have to keep our eyes open, guys. This is real stuff. And there's no political party that you can choose. That's why you have to know the issues. You have to be aware of what's coming. You have to know where the technology is and where these people are going. And that's why JD Vance has a lot of personal opinions that I agree with. I think he's a better option than a lot of the other people, but his connections to Peter Thiel, his support for Palantir, I mean, this stuff is coming. And I wouldn't be surprised that by the end of the Trump administration, the foundation of the technocratic control system will be in place. And I wouldn't be surprised if JD Vance is the next president after Trump, and then he takes it even further in the name of conservative U.S. national populist values and policies. So we got to keep our eyes open. Moses throws in $10. Thank you so much, Moses. He says, good stream, bro. Thank you very much, Moses. Really appreciate that. God bless you. I know that maybe we have a difference of opinion on the programming of virtue and the definition of axioms, but I personally, at least as an Orthodox Christian, because I'll concede our presupposition is that virtue are tied to in the embodiment of these uncreated energies of God, that you can't program an uncreated, you can't program love, you can't program integrity. You can't program honor. You can't program mercy and compassion. That's my personal opinion. Maybe you disagree, brother. But I do appreciate the support. God bless you and your family. And Jet throws in 5. Thank you very much, Jet. He says, thank you for $5. Thank you, Jet. Really appreciate that. Let me just check, make sure I don't miss anybody. Eric Vigilant throws in 5, says, what's up, Doc? I learned about Palantir and JD Vance connection from Nick Fuentes. Oh, what are your opinions on Nick? Do you watch his stuff? No, I don't watch his stuff very often. My opinions on Nick, I think he's a pretty sharp guy. He's very articulate. He has many opinions that I would also support. I don't watch a lot of his stuff as of recent. And back in the day, I would say probably 4 years ago, or maybe 5 years ago. It was probably 5 years ago. I did a stream or a video around early 2020, and I made fun of the Groypers talking about chicken nuggies and chalky milk and mommy's milkers. And I talked about language and neoteny and the retention of juvenile characteristics into adulthood. And he blocked me. So I'm actually blocked by Nick Fuentes. So that's one of the reasons why I don't engage with much of his content. But never interacted with him. Maybe it was just somebody was upset, maybe one of his followers, and he just went ahead. I have no idea. But, I think it's strange that he doesn't have a girlfriend. I think it's strange for a guy with that much money to not, especially with being a traditional Catholic. I think it's strange to not be pursuing a wife. I think it's strange how he mocks sometimes. I've seen videos of him mocking some of his importers who are married and stuff like that. So I don't know. I know there's a rumor he might be a Fed. I've seen some of that stuff regarding like J6 and things like that. The no-fly list and him getting off of it. I don't know. I really don't follow it that much. I'm not super into that world. But I have heard the speculation about, the cat boys and things like that. I have no idea. I'm not going to cast any allegations against him, but yeah, I do think it's strange for a guy. He's in his mid-20s now. What's he like, 25, 26? Trad Catholic, lots of money, big following. I just don't see how he wouldn't be able to find a girlfriend if he really wanted one. And then I've seen some clips. Again, I don't follow very regularly, but he like makes fun of the idea of being with a woman. I've seen him call like sex with your wife gay. Could just be trolling, could just be jokes. I don't know. It's just kind of weird. It's just not my vibe. I just feel like Fuentes' vibe is like for younger guys. And I think if you're a married man, it's just kind of not your vibe. Although I've seen interviews he's been in, I thought they went really well, and he had a lot of opinions that I like. So that's kind of my take, Eric, on Fuentes. So, it's kind of a milquetoast take. I really don't have any strong opinions. And Eric throws another $2, says, what are your opinions on the ICE raids and riots? Well, we're not deporting enough people. I think the riots are totally unorganic. I wouldn't be surprised if Palantir and some of the power players that are behind orchestrating them for the purpose of creating more support for their surveillance technologies. To me, that makes a lot of sense. Definitely the NGOs are behind the riots because these pallets of bricks, just like in Minnesota, they just magically appear. And we know that these left-wing organizations, and then who funds the left-wing organizations, and then you find all these NGOs that are funding on both right and the left. And sometimes they have a strong allegiance to Israel, sometimes not. But, do with that information what you will. So I see the riots as organic in the sense of so many illegals and people related to people who are illegally entered this country feeling upset that they may be deported. I see the mayor of LA and the governor of California aiding and abetting the riots for political purposes to create a division and opposition to Trump and sort of tamping down the chaos. I don't think it's going to work for the Democrats. I don't think that the average person in California, and even if they are a Democrat, say they've always been a Democrat, say they're a progressive, and if they're living around these riots, I don't think they're going to be upset with Trump, issuing the National Guard. I heard that he was sending 700 Marines there for tonight. So I see it it's organic in the sense that young, like, people are going out there and rioting, and of course it's all just to cause destruction. They're looting, they're burning things down, and they're fighting the police. But what for? I mean, if you're not here illegally, what the hell do you have to worry about? So I'm in favor of more deportations. I think all illegal immigrants need to be out of the country. I personally suspect that it's well over 50 million. So I believe personally that there's over 50 million illegals in the United States. I don't think we're ever going to get rid of them. I think that Tom Homan and ICE has been very, very disappointing. I think the Trump administration has been very, very underwhelming regarding deportations. And it seems like they're more concerned with stopping anti-Semitism than getting the illegals. Now, has the border crossings died down? Yes. That's been great that the border crossings are lower, but come on. It just doesn't seem like it's going very well. So I think we need more ICE raids. I would be in favor. I saw that Eric Prince offered Trump to be hired as like a third party, essentially a government contractor for the deliberate intention of deportations. Of course, Eric Prince, he ran Blackwater, the government contractor, basically like special operations soldiers, and they were a third party. And he's got opinions, some opinions I disagree with, some opinions that I fully agree with. I did a deep dive on Eric Prince back around the time that Trump, the assassination attempt that he made in the year. Around that time, I did a big deep dive on Eric Prince. So, I mean, if Trump was serious, why wouldn't he just hire Eric Prince as a third-party government contractor and have them kick him out? Then, like, who are they going to be upset at? Trump and Eric Prince? I mean, it's, to me, that would be, so I personally feel the Trump administration is not real serious about these mass deportations. And I saw today that Rand Paul wanted to, I guess the Trump administration's wants like $150 million for the border. Okay, great. Sounds good for me. And Rand Paul, who I generally like, is like, oh no, that's too much money. We need to cut that in half. They should only get like 70 some million for the border. I'm thinking, what is the problem with spending more? I mean, we've spent billions of dollars for Ukraine, but 150 some million for the border's too much for Rand Paul. That doesn't make any sense. And then I saw, who I'm personally a big fan of. I think he's the best congressman that we have, is Thomas Massie. And he kind of corrected himself today, because I issued a retweet to him yesterday that he was talking about how we need to deport the criminals. And I've been seeing that rhetoric a lot from people in the Trump administration. And it's beginning to sound like they only want to deport illegals that commit a crime other than entering the country illegally. And so I just feel like there's a lack of will by the Republicans, by the Trump administration. There's a handful of people within. I think Stephen Miller is legitimate. I think Stephen Miller would like these mass deportations, but I'm just not seeing it happen, and I don't see the political will for it. So I'm a little bit pessimistic about them, Eric. So that'd be my final take on that. And Journey of Abundance gifted 5 COTEL Crew memberships. Thank you so much, Journey of Abundance. Really appreciate that. Thank you very, very much for that support. And shout out to everyone who got that membership in the chat. Cold Quest, Rigovich, T-Rod, Bagged Milk, and Jelani, all gifted COTEL Crew memberships. Thank you so much, Journey of Abundance. God bless you, bro. And let me just check the other platforms, make sure I didn't miss anything real quick. All right. Well, guys, that is going to do it for me. I will see you in the next stream. I suspect it will be probably Wednesday. Wednesday we'll be doing another stream, and I have a few that I want to do. One is on the history of Christian Zionism. I had like 2 or 3 streams that I had lined up, and then I got these sponsored streams I got to do. One that I'll be doing in the near future, it's actually a sponsored stream. Shout out to the Eschaton Vigil, is diving into biblical understanding of fabrics and energy. So the Bible talks about cotton and wool, and then it talks about not mixing cotton and wool. And there's been some interesting research. Again, this isn't like hard science per se, but looking at synthetic fabrics, and the frequency of people wearing a synthetic fabric is similar to like a corpse, whereas the frequency when you're wearing natural fabrics like cotton or wool or linen, like that's what the Bible says, don't mix linen and cotton. Those fabrics, the idea is looking at sort of contemporary clothing, what the Bible says, and what we're seeing regarding that stuff. So I think I might do a stream on that as well. That's a sponsored stream by Eschaton Vigil. So anyways, we're going to be doing a stream Wednesday, and I think Jake Rattlesnake is going to be on the channel Thursday or Friday. So I got to set that up officially. But guys, smash that like. Yeah, L polyester. Yeah, all synthetic fabrics. At least that's what we're going to be presenting. Maybe some people disagree, but we'll be checking it out. But oh yeah, and we got the John Anon stream right here. John, I'm already working on it. Voice in the Wilderness. I got to read through this, and I'm going to have this stream done before I go to the Whatever podcast, which is I got 2 debates on June 21st and then a panel on June 22nd. I'll be on the Whatever podcast. So John, I plan on having this presented sometime next week, and yeah, looking forward to it. So anyways, God bless you all, and I will see you on Wednesday. As always, until then, God bless.